Two-sentence horror. They said I was lucky because I left the sleepover 10 minutes before the serial killer arrived and turned it into a bloodbath. Maybe next time they shouldn't tell the quiet kid to go home as their truth or dare challenge. The girl looked up at me from her hospital bed and said, "Thank you for saving me, doctor. I don't want to die anymore." My stomach sank with the news I had come to bring her. She had taken too much, and now there was nothing anyone could do to save her from dying slowly over the next few days while her organs shut down from the poison. "Captain, the organisms we released on the planet have finally produced enough carbon dioxide to make the atmosphere breathable for us. Okay, it's time to land and exterminate them," said the captain as he looked down at bright blue sphere known to its inhabitants as Earth.
My husband is in massive debt, which is why I was confused as to how he paid for our vacation. When 4 men with cameras came into the hotel room and my husband was nowhere to be seen, I realized what he did.
"Open up! It's the police!" We yelled through the door to surprise the groom with a night out before his wedding. But when we unlocked the door and walked in, we found him crying at his computer, wiping his hard drives frantically. "I will give you all the riches you will ever need in exchange for your firstborn son, and if you do not have a son by the end of your life, your soul will be mine." After the 17th miscarriage, I started to catch on that it wasn't a firstborn the devil wanted. "Stay back! I have a cross!" she yelled, thrusting it forward with all her might. The vampire chuckled darkly, eyes glinting with amusement, and murmured, "Nice try, but I'm a few centuries older than the religion this trinket represents." "Please, God, don't let it look in the closet," I silently prayed. "Please, God, don't let it look in the closet," it parroted back from the next room. My boyfriend is always so sweet when I'm throwing up. Even though he says I look disgusting as he hands me the toothbrush, he reminds me that I'll be beautiful once I've lost all that weight. My cell phone connected to the Bluetooth in my car automatically, so the cop who'd pulled me over heard every word. "Ma'am, I'm not seeing any officers on duty anywhere along the I-90, the 911 dispatcher whispered. I knew something was wrong about 20 minutes after finishing my drink, so I sought out my friend in the crowded club and pleaded for him to get me home safely. As I sat slumped in the back of the cab, my eyes heavy and his hand under my skirt, I realized he was not my friend. After pointing the gun at my son's head, the man with the mask asked if I wanted him to live or die, and I made the wrong choice. It's been 20 years since he took him from me, and he still sends me horrific images of the tortures he likes to put my son through. I held my crying son over the cliff, praying my arms wouldn't give out as I watched the other weeping parents let go of their children one by one. The soldiers with the guns sit behind us and keep laughing as they repeat, "The one who lasts the longest gets to keep their brat." You're stuck in a room with a robot algorithm whose only goal is to generate noise, and you are hoping and pleading that it doesn't figure out that pain makes humans scream. When the woman saw that the bonnet the midwife placed on her newborn's tiny little head was not blue, she wept, for she knew that it meant that in about a year or so, she would be a new mother for the 5th time. "You get any 3 wishes you desire," the genie whispered in my ear. I whispered back, "I'd like to make cancer contagious." "I'm sorry, your baby passed away. But here's your money. I had a really good time, though." "Suicide is never the answer. Just, please, put down the knife and..." Who the hell said anything about suicide? Remember, we are very lucky that we could afford to move, and I promise you will make new friends. My mother's words meant nothing as I stared out the window of the space capsule, watching Earth light up with nuclear explosions. You took LSD decades ago and had a great trip followed by a fantastic life. Suddenly, you are 14 years old again and waking up on the floor of your mom's house. My sister was jealous over a guy she likes liking me, so I offered a ritual to switch bodies with her tonight. Stirring my drink amused, I observe as he carried her by the shoulder into his car and hopefully a place where I won't see her again. Ever since my dog was a puppy, we loved playing hide and seek. He would always find me with a simple call, "Here, boy," no matter where I was. But now, trapped at the bottom of this well, hungry and desperate, I kinda regret teaching him the game. "Here, boy." The prophet had warned that her daughter would kill her. She assumed it would happen in childbirth, yet here she was, healthy, cradling a baby girl with eyes full of innocence and wonder. When my wife succumbed to an incurable illness, I donated her body to science so she could help save mankind. My only worry now is how they will stop it before the population drops too far. It was a simple deal. I would receive $50 billion in exchange for my bloodline ending. It was only when the world grew suddenly silent that I remembered. If you go far enough back, the whole human race is one family. I tucked my child into bed, and as I turned to leave, they said, "Daddy, I think there is someone in my closet." When I opened the door to check, I only found an empty closet and a note pinned to the inside, written in my handwriting. "She isn't real." The genie said I could wish back 4 people, so I chose my father, grandfather, the man who shot JFK, and the man who drowned my hated baby brother. "I said 4 people," said the genie. "Pick 3 more." I jokingly gave the man my PayPal after he told me he would give $1 million if I could survive a year in the last video game I played without respawn. Drenched in my own blood, $1 million richer, I realize I should have listened to my parents when they told me not to play such violent and horrific games. My doll broke again, and I cried when Mommy took it to throw it away. She says one of Daddy's slave women is almost due, and I'm going to have a brand new doll very soon. My boyfriend just showed me his favorite movie. I don't remember him filming it. When I woke up in the hospital, everyone assured me that I was fine and mostly came away with scrapes and bruises. When I asked about my daughter, who had been sitting in the back seat, no one was willing to meet my gaze. Tara frantically rummaged through the dumpster's foul, decaying trash, tears streaming down her face as she whispered,
"I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this. I'm so sorry."
when the raspy voice of an old woman sounded behind her.
"What you're searching for is long gone,"
She said, with a nearly toothless grin.
"but you're welcome to join us in the circle for dinner since you provided the meat."
I got the call that my wife had given birth. When I arrived, the doctor could not stop apologizing. "I do that because I love her. You'll do it too once you grow up," I gently explained to my 6-year-old, standing in the corner of the room after bearing witness to me beating his mother. I was stunned to see a 3 a.m. text from my brother, who hadn't called since leaving to run some kind of military silo in the Midwest years ago. I furrowed my brow in confusion as I read and reread the text. "Get out of the city now. Ronnie, I love you, my bro, forever." The smell was overwhelming as we opened the basement door and saw the rotting remains of the 3 young men chained to the wall. My uncle had been leaving notes everywhere as he quickly succumbed to Alzheimer's, and the one that said, "Don't forget to feed the boys," suddenly took on a whole new meaning. I knew when I heard my parents say those words over the phone that the doppelgangers had already claimed them. "We love you no matter what." In my culture, after you die, you are never truly gone, while someone living still remembers you. I just wish these bastards would forget me so that I can finally leave this hellish half-life I am suffering through.
"I hate you," my little sister screamed at me as she slammed my door. "I know," I thought, as I looked down on the bottles of pills that would soon make my family happy, no longer having to deal with me as a disappointment. It was tragic when my husband choked to death on one of the sandwiches I made during our visit to Stonehenge, but the following month we had such insanely good luck, even winning the lotto, that I'm starting to believe it somehow counted as a sacrifice, and I think just one more might set my kids up for life. The aliens told us that they had fled to space to escape their dying planet, and when they offered to share technology and knowledge in exchange for shelter, we happily accepted them. After the virulent fungal infection they brought had ravaged humanity, those of us that remained were left with the irresistible desire to climb aboard their now vacant ship and seek out new civilizations among the stars. My name is Mandy, I'm 17 years old, I'm captain of the cheer squad, and my boy is the football quarterback. I don't know why the doctors grimaced when they heard my answer, or the gray-haired lady who looks sort of like my mom started crying. The chubby, nerdy loser guy who kept trying to hold my hand looked like I'd stabbed him in the guts.
The girl didn't like how big her front teeth were, so she decided to get them fixed. Looking in the mirror, she squinted her eyes in concentration as she raised the nail clippers to her mouth. The sharp gaze pierced the boy as the figure urged him to read the passed note out loud to the class. With shaky words, he finally uttered the phrase, "That's not our teacher." I finally worked up the courage to kill myself. "Welcome to the club," said the other versions of me that did the same thing at other points, as we watched the version that chose not to pull the trigger every time live his life. If our astronaut came back completely healthy after their 4-year trip, then I don't understand what I'm supposed to be worried about. But sir, you don't understand. None of the food or water has been touched. The trip to Disney World had really cheered me up after yet another miscarriage. Your parents don't want you anymore. That's why we're your new parents, I heard myself say to the girl that was now in our back seat. As I lay in the hospital bed, I regaled my doctor with stories of the hidden trails I've hiked, caves I've explored, and mountains I've climbed. The doctor was in awe until he said, "You've been in a 30-year coma, your parents have passed, and your siblings signed papers to pull your plug if you weren't showing recovering brain activity by this weekend." When I was diagnosed with autism, my mom took me to the hospital to get me fixed. I woke up in a hospital room with a dull ache and an emptiness below my belly button. My friend was a wreck after the sudden death of her first cat, but was overjoyed when she called to tell me she had adopted a new kitten. While I prepared to go and meet the newest furball, I smiled wickedly as I wrapped her welcoming gift, another fresh bouquet of white lilies. The doctor told me that my husband needed a machine to breathe for him, and that his condition would be reassessed in the morning. When morning came, the only machines that were plugged into the wall were my kids' cell phones. My mom and dad said this was a really common procedure and it was nothing to be afraid of. But the whole family is acting weird. My older sister keeps saying she loves me when she's never said that before. Mom just apologized for little things that I'd forgotten about months ago, and I'm pretty sure I saw Dad crying by my bed last night while I was half asleep. My whole family had been over for a massive feast, but I was the guest of honor, and to me that was a huge deal, considering I was the most unpopular out of everyone. As everyone chows down on their delicious meal, I stare around, grinning from ear to ear, as I reach down to touch the empty space where my leg once was, and think, I'm so glad my family finally loves something about me. A man offered me one of 2 envelopes, one containing the cause of my death and the other containing the date. So without much thought, I chose the second one. On the piece of paper, it simply read N.A. When my dad forgot where he put the wrench, everyone stopped and stared. Once deemed incompetent in the bunker, you were put to use as much-needed protein for the remaining survivors. "I have some pot roast on the table for you, honey," my wife said as I got home from work. I thought that was rather strange, considering I was dead broke, we had no food, and had 4 kids who needed to be fed first. We celebrated the end of the war, as it meant we were finally going home after years as POWs. Our celebration turned to panic when we realized our train was taking us further north instead of back south. I thought the worst part of being lost at sea would be starving to death as our teeth fell out, but as my husband's old scars started opening up, I remembered that our son had been born by cesarean section. Despite the pain, I keep trying to reach for the string of my tampon while the blood smears my fingers and drips down to my wrist. I don't care what the doctors say, paranoia this and hysteria that. I know there's a tampon stuck in there and I won't stop digging until I get it out. "What smells so good?" asked my father, his voice making Mom instinctively flinch as she tended the simmering pot. "You're just desserts," she whispered, a smile beaming across her bruised face as she doused him in boiling sugar. My wife puts our 2 children to bed, with hushed stories of all the things we will do when it's safe to go above ground again. Click, click, click. I slide the last 3 bullets into my old service revolver as I dispose of tonight's dinner, closing the door on a now bare pantry. Today, I found out that my soon-to-be wife has a boyfriend. Seems like I'll have to get rid of him before I ask her out on our first date. The strangers gave me no medicine, no pain relief, and barely any food. The only thing they handed me was a note in my handwriting that I didn't remember writing. "I don't want to be a burden. Let me go when it gets bad. When I saw the spider, my first instinct was to grab my blowtorch. As I held my daughter down and tried to get it to light, I reminded her that I will not tolerate tattoos in my household. Losing my husband was the saddest day of my life, and I broke down in tears. I know how it feels to lose someone really close, but you had to take your pills eventually, said my therapist. When my fun and popular twin suggested we switch clothes for the day, I got excited at the thought of hanging out with the cool kids for a change. It's been a year now, and still no one has realized that it wasn't my body they found in the river that day. The penis is gone. Never forget I love you, no matter what, I texted my family's group chat. Just then, the shooter leaned under the table and took aim, and I heard my brother's custom text tone sound from his pocket. Catching my wife with another man in the guest room, I emptied an entire clip into them before settling on the couch to think. When my wife called later to remind me that her twin sister and her boyfriend were staying for a few days, the gravity of what I'd done began to sink in. Hundreds of millions took the suicide pills rather than face the killer asteroid heading for Earth. The scientists who knew it would miss were all dedicated to population reduction and never broke their vow of silence. They say there's 3 deaths: when your body dies, when you're put in the grave, and when your name is spoken for the last time. As I look across the barren wasteland, I know that the first will be soon, the second, never, and the third, a long time ago. I couldn't believe my wife would argue so hard for my dog in the divorce, but I was thrilled when she said I could pick him up from the vet. When the vet tech apologized for my loss while handing me the box, I knew I'd lost everything. I couldn't believe my wife would argue so hard for my dog in the divorce, but I was thrilled when she said I could pick him up from the vet. When the vet tech apologized for my loss while handing me the box, I knew I'd lost everything. The year is 2028, and the police have arrested a man trying to break into your home. After you and the intruder's wealthy parents submit the receipts for your legal fees to the judge, it's declared that you caused the intruder emotional distress and you're sentenced to 20 years in prison. I found a secret room in the basement of my new house containing piles of bones and an old TV still turned on and displaying a large number 19. As the door slammed behind me and locked, the number changed to 20. I broke down sobbing when I received word that all the tests were in and that my daughter was to be drafted for service in the armed forces. I watched her sleeping in her crib that night, knowing that in the morning they would come for her and that she would never know her mother. We captured the injured alien from a crashed ship and chained it up in my basement to study it. As it died, it kept whispering things in its strange language, like agua, por favor, agua, and oh Dios duele. After having 10 miscarriages, I offered the demon my soul in exchange for carrying a baby to term. I sat in my hospital bed and cried as I placed my baby's tiny, motionless fingers against my cheek. Football didn't come home this year, but my husband did, reeking of alcohol and rage, his eyes promising a strike I couldn't escape. Usually I'm not this quick to tell people I can see the dead, but in your case I urgently need to make an exception, because the dead can see you. My wife handed me the gun, tears streaming down her eyes as she couldn't bear it herself. I aimed the gun at my dad, or what used to be him. I yelled at my oldest son after he called me at work, whispering to me that his little brother shot him while playing Call of Duty. "Sweetie, he's too young to be playing that game," I shouted into the phone before hanging up, not knowing that my youngest boy found his dad's gun beneath the floorboard. "Man, you have to tell me the name of your artist," he clapped me on the shoulder, "because I love that massive spider tattoo on your back. I'd never wanted a tattoo before, but at that moment, I truly wished I'd had one." I drove the stake through my daughter's heart, as Dr. Helsing told me to. As the police loaded me into the cruiser, I noticed that Dr. Helsing's reflection didn't show up in the rearview mirror. After the war, everyone lauded me for the 14 Jews I hid and kept safe from the Nazis in my attic. I hope they never find the 3 I kept for myself in the basement. Please, officer, I'm begging you, send someone. My ex has a knife and he's downstairs. For the last time, miss, you can call back if he's actually done something, because if he hasn't hurt anyone, then I'm not sure what you'd expect me to do. My family all gathered on the lake boat on the 7th anniversary of my brother's disappearance. Our solemn moods shifted to dread as my father yanked on his pole and slowly reeled in a foot with his signature birthmark. I had the cop's quote chiseled into my daughter's headstone as a reminder to all how he protected and served. There's nothing we can do because your ex isn't committing any actionable offenses. The fortune teller had told me that fame would be mine once I stopped smoking, so I laid back in bed and lit a final cigarette as I dreamed of my new life. As a gaggle of leering medical students crowded around my bandaged flesh, excitedly taking notes as I wailed beneath the gauze, they marveled at how a man could survive third-degree burns over 97% of his body. As a soldier, I've seen enough wounds to know what's not survivable. As a parent, all I can do is hold her and tell her how much I love her. I woke in a tub of ice, only remembering picking up a beautiful woman during my 25th birthday party pub crawl. There was a note next to the tub that read, "Your first kidney had so much cancer, we left the other, good luck." After jumping off the building, I instantly regretted it. I never realized that I could have landed on someone much less a stroller, but I did. 1, 2, 3, my daughter counted, excited to play a little game of hide and seek. "That's it, sweetie, keep counting," I said with tears in my eyes as I pulled back my revolver's hammer, taking one last look at the bite on her arm. I had everything lined up to leave, including divorce papers, all my documents, a women's shelter to go to temporarily, when the worst happened. Just one day before escaping, my husband was in an auto accident, leaving him with locked-in syndrome and leaving me free to do my absolute worst to him as retribution for the decades of abuse and assaults. My kidnapper asked me to kick a wall full speed to leave. I didn't understand why until I noticed the toothpicks lodged under my toenails. Today in science class, we learned that eventually the sun would die and make it so that life on Earth would end. I hugged my son as the news flashed behind him, warning that eventually wasn't millions of years away like we thought it was. Because every one of the computer's predictions had come true, we asked it what year humans would cease to exist. We were shocked when the screen displayed a simple 1945. The fortune teller had foreseen that I would die soon of something terminal, so I dedicated my remaining days to risk-taking and thrill-seeking. But as I uselessly yanked the reserve parachute cord again and again, the ground far below rapidly drawing near, I realized that it wasn't cancer she meant. "Mommy, there's a ghost in my room pretending to be you!" cried my son as he ran into my arms. It's only when I smiled with all my 3 rows of teeth that the poor thing realized I wasn't his mom either. "Do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" She had no idea what some of those words meant, but she still nodded vigorously, as her parents had commanded her to. I never believed in bear attacks in my state until I came across one last week. I don't think I'll be going back there anytime soon, as I'm not in a rush to meet the thing that tore that poor grizzly to shreds. As soon as my Billy closed his eyes after the injection, I asked the veterinarian how long would the sedation last. He stared at me and stuttered, "Wait, aren't you Ms. Hill with Lucky?"
"See how they crack, pop, and burn?" I asked my daughter as she held the magnifying glass. She laughed delightedly as I held down her rapist as she passed the magnifying glass over his front teeth. "I'm old, the last on Earth, and have worn down my teeth, so I know the end is upon me. But I do have one last chance to keep my species alive." "All set, Mr. Johnstone," the youthful nurse replied, oblivious to the trance she was in as she placed my final 2 pints of blood alongside all the human donations. Hearing a crash, I run out of the bathroom, hands dripping wet, to see my 3-year-old unmoving at the bottom of the stairs. Hours later, as the paramedics sadly leave, I remember I'd been bathing her little brother when I heard the noise.
If you ever suspect that a strangely unidentifiable black sedan is following you late at night, do not, under any circumstance, return to your home. No matter who you think you see in that car, keep driving until daylight. I knew that my gambling debts were now insurmountable, so with deep regret, I wrote a suicide note and loaded my pistol. My wife's insurance payout should net me just enough to buy into a game where I can win it all back, and I'm betting that the cops won't be able to prove it was me. Although skeptical, I took the aspirin for my migraines, like the doctor said I should. I just can't help but think if my husband had had the same symptoms, they'd have done a brain scan already. When the devil offered me a guaranteed lottery win in exchange for 1 year off the lifespan of every human on Earth, I accepted without a second thought. Waking up the next day to discover that 80% of the population had mysteriously died overnight, I began to question if I had made the right decision. "This town ain't big enough for the two of us," the sheriff said. The bandit just smiled, pulled out a stick of dynamite and hurled it at the crowd before asking, "How about now?" Alzheimer's greedy fingers began plucking memories of us from our father one by one, but we have no idea what disease is now planting in him, the locations of hundreds of missing teenagers' bodies. The man had the option between counting to 1 billion or 10 years in prison for his punishment. It was only after 20 years, when he had lost count, that he realized his mistakes. Remember when you were a kid and you'd pretend to be asleep if your parents came into your room at night? I'm hoping that still works, but my dad's been dead for 10 years, and this man dressed like him has been standing here for 6 hours. Standing amongst my dying competitors, the host revealed I had won $10,000. He asked me if I wanted to play another round, acting as if he didn't know what my cancer treatment cost. "Make me healthy," wished the sick little girl after she found an old lamp in the basement. "Are you sure you want to reverse your brother's wish?" said a voice from inside the lamp. My first mistake was ignoring the report of vampires in the city. My second mistake was buying that all-are-welcome doormat. When our daughter was born, my husband smiled and said, "You're my second favorite girl now. Tonight, I'll give my lactose-intolerant daughter her first glass of milk." At first, I was reluctant to go to medical school because of the cadavers. Thankfully, great comfort arose when I discovered several other lab coats bulging. I was so hungry, I finished the crust in seconds, but I knew the mantle would be my favorite part. I opened my eyes in the dark to find my wife sitting up in bed, staring at me. Her face was blank, eyes wide open, as she whispered, "You're not supposed to see me awake." The ritual would allow us to bring our daughter back, but only if we sacrificed someone. We chose her killer, but when she opened her eyes and looked over, her first words were, "That's not him." The employee handbook said no jewelry, but I was so excited about my engagement ring that I didn't think it would hurt anything. That was the day I learned how literal degloving could be. The girl took one last deep breath before she jumped down into the canyon. Wanting to leave this world quickly and painlessly, she questioned her plan, now only able to blink and cry as the black vultures tore into her unmoving body. Unfortunately, I almost lost my parents because of a gas leak, but don't worry, I will get them next time. Although 4 members of the family were found dead in the house, the reporter was saying, the couple's baby survived unnoticed in an upstairs room. I'm getting careless these days. You would think from the name this would be a great place to celebrate Pride Month, I chuckled, nudging my colorfully dressed companion. He didn't laugh with me, for the cold that was numbing my broken body had already taken him, so all I could do was wait for a rescue I knew would never come. I never really understood why my abuser called me his little plum, but when I got older and he passed away, I hated that word and never ever had them around me if I could. My blood went cold when my 1-year-old looked at me with a knowing look and said his first word, plum. "Congratulations on your beautiful twins!" the nurse exclaims as I cradle both my baby boys in my arms. Her smile fades as she continues. "However, due to our country's one-child policy, you're only allowed to keep one. Choose wisely." "Oh no, honey, I'm not pregnant," I said as a strange child came up and began asking me why my baby was upset, pointing at my belly. "But I can hear it trying to get out. It says it's coming whether you like it or not." After experiencing the same day hundreds of times, I killed someone just to see what it felt like. I woke up at the dawn of next day to the sound of police breaking down my door. Temperatures today are expected to reach a high of 35 degrees Celsius, so remember to use that sunscreen, the radio bulletin crackled. The sweating scientist sighed as he turned off the radio, fondly remembering a time when Antarctica had snow. The surgeons told me I may experience some phantom sensations in my missing limb, a side effect of my brain reckoning what should be there with what really is. I've read and reread the pamphlet they gave me, but nowhere on the list of symptoms does it say why I feel a cold, wet hand holding mine. Drip, drip, drip. It's been 15 minutes and I'm beginning to think my interrogator didn't fake his heart attack. As the child strayed ever farther from her distracted parents, I prepared to jump from the shadows and take her. As her foot inched over the edge of the pool, I drew my scythe. The kid had never seen a cruise ship in her entire life, and so she wanted to take a closer look. The Kraken pulled the cruise ship down so her kid could check it out thoroughly. As we pulled into the McDonald's drive-thru, my friend clutched his bleeding wound and asked what we were doing here. Sorry, man, but I couldn't afford the ad-free self-driving, so the car is going to be stopping at a few stores and restaurants before we get to the hospital. I was pissed that my daughter had her phone set to D&D again, 2 hours past curfew, so I used the location tracker to find her myself. Now I'm standing in an empty alley next to the dumpster where the location tracker has pinged her phone, and I'm honestly too terrified to open the lid and look inside. I informed the parents that we couldn't find their daughter after the earthquake. It's easier than accepting that it was impossible to rescue her, even though we heard her buried calls for help. Did you know that just 27 standard cotton threads have enough tensile strength to suspend a fully grown adult human by the penis? Or at least I assume they do, since that's the point in my experiments, when the penises started snapping before the string. "Honey, I'm home!" my husband shouted as he opened the front door. It seemed the witness protection program failed me. The fortune teller said I would be hunted by a gang of killers, so I moved to a remote bay in British Columbia, far away from people. No one saw when something big tipped me out of my boat while I fished one evening, or heard me scream as a dozen black horrors pulled me down into the sea. The group of beautiful German women in military uniforms ordered my friends and I to pull down our pants. Unfortunately, they told me to go home while my circumcised friends got to go on a train ride with them. My girlfriend wasn't a fan of the cats scratching the furniture, and when I returned from a week away, I found she had declawed my pets. I knew what I had to do and grabbed my pruning shears to declaw her. My husband was really hurt when I told him I didn't want kids anymore. He was probably more hurt when he realized the crib was empty. I wished to be able to instantly understand any language that is spoken to me. The wind is begging for help, and I don't want to know from what. I smiled as my abusive stepmother was put in handcuffs. It's unfortunate it took such a drastic decision for someone to notice, but I'm at least glad they read my suicide note. After waking up in a bathtub full of ice, missing a kidney, I obviously reported it to the police. The board officer told me that no crime had been committed, since involuntary organ retrieval was covered under the Netflix EULA I had, of course, read and agreed to. My twin and I always fought over everything, for the last piece of pizza, who got to brush their teeth first, who got their hair brushed by Mom. She always got everything in her favor, even now, as we headed to the operating room, where she would have the life of having a body without a conjoined twin attached to her neck. The girl who had just moved into the house across the street kindly offered to babysit my kids. After my wife and I returned home from our date night to find the kids missing, the lady across the street told us that she didn't have a daughter. When the machines took over, we thought it would be like Terminator with hunter bots shooting people in the streets, nukes, etc. With access to our online history, they could just turn us on each other. "I'm gonna break your fingers if you don't start talking." It wasn't until he pulled out the liquid nitrogen that I realized he wasn't just talking about the bones. He was pleased by how well the erectile dysfunction pills he got off the internet worked. He was less pleased 4 hours later when his erection still hadn't gone down, but his diabetic girlfriend had a spare syringe and an idea. "Felix is staring at that wall again. What a silly cat," my husband said. I didn't think Felix was silly, because I am certain he knows what is hidden behind that wall.
It's the trees, the climatologist wheezed. They're not producing oxygen anymore, but that's not the worst part. They're doing it on purpose. The newborn looked at me in the eyes and said, "Only one of us will leave this room alive." You know how this goes. The first sentence builds up tension for something scary. Give me enough time to pick the lock on your back door.
As Jeremy gave his high school graduation speech, he used his hand to shield the sun from his eyes. When he noticed it was actually the glint from a rifle scope, his jaw dropped, along with the rest of his body. "Told you there is nothing in there," my son said, as I was shining the flashlight into the dark, empty space. I kept looking into the cut on my son's skin with my flashlight, but could only see empty space behind the skin. My parents rarely talk about my brother who died when I was a baby. Walking through the halls, I heard my mother whisper to my dad, "He's getting too big for us to keep him down there, honey." "Did I stop 9/11?" the time traveler asked when he returned. His colleague raised an eyebrow and replied, "Which 9/11th did you try to stop again?" I finished writing the name on the magical scroll, which would teleport me to any individual I named. As the flames began scorching the flesh from my bones, I realized I had misspelled Santa. My friend has been feeding her cat a vegan diet for a few months now. This morning, she was found with her jugular ripped out of her throat and the cat nowhere to be seen. She fell in love with me when I trusted her enough to tell her that I have a mental health condition where I take everything literally. Tears started to slide down my face when she asked me to come upstairs and rearrange her guts. Poof! The last person who remembered you has passed, and you are truly gone. I know the church failed your mother, but you must ask yourself if this is how she would want you to be remembered, pleaded the priest. Considering her last words to me were, "Give 'em hell," I retorted, while the first wave of demons poured through the portal I had just opened. The doctor didn't believe me when I said I had parasites, so I decided to prove it. I wish he'd stop freaking out about how much blood I'm losing and look at the weird red worms I pulled out of my arm. Despite what the veterinarian said, you bullishly stuck to your beliefs, confident that you knew what was best for your pets. As the cat sniffed weakly at yet another raw vegan meal, you tell yourself you're only imagining the bones jutting visibly beneath their patchy fur. "Okay," I heard Alexa say from the other room, responding to a command. I hadn't spoken, and no one else was home. "That was close," I said, swerving away from oncoming traffic. The cold eyes of my fiancée froze me in place as she reached over and steered us back into the stream of headlights. Before leaving the room, my daughter waved to everyone and everyone waved back. No matter the channel or the show, whenever my daughter waves at the TV, everyone on screen waves back with a smile. "The baby's happy and healthy, ma'am," the doctor said. "Nothing to worry about." I didn't know how to tell her I was born a male, and the thing inside me couldn't possibly be human. A young woman arrived at the ER, agonized by a large ice pick lodged in her left eye. After learning of her history of migraines, the doctor wrote her a prescription for strong painkillers and sent her on her way. They say you die once when you stop breathing, and a second time when someone says your name for the last time. Sitting alone in my dilapidated apartment for years now, I realize it's not always in that order. They say we have a primal sense that we can just feel when someone is watching us. It's been a few weeks, and it's clear that you do not have that sense. I look at my father's head on the wall, knowing that he'll finally be proud of me today. Then I look back at the terrified hunter and sink my antlers into his chest. "What is that?" my shaky voice whispered as I stared at the blob on the ultrasound of my young daughter's brain. The doctor was pale as she answered, "That's her sister." I thanked the barista at Starbucks as she handed me my coffee with my name written on the cup. It wasn't until I left the store that I remembered I hadn't told her my name. Scientists announced today that the search for life beyond Earth is officially over. They've confirmed, without a doubt, that we are utterly alone in the entire universe. I never knew why. The zombies all remembered things like their last words. My boyfriend's walking corpse has stayed pressed into the chain link for days, rasping at me. "We shouldn't have come." I've been stuck in this broken elevator for only a few hours, but I've already given up pleading for help. No one could hear me over the screaming outside, and I'm more worried about the viscous, rusty sludge oozing through the elevator doors. This harvest looks like it's going to be unusually large. I concur. 8.2 billion must be a new record for a single planet. My son was mute ever since housebreakers killed his sister in front of him. My blood ran cold as he screamed when the judge entered the courtroom. I had a miscarriage, and my father comforted me with a cold, "Everything happens for a reason." Years later, as he begged for my kidney, I leaned in close and whispered back, "Everything happens for a reason." The warlock was powerful, but not so powerful as to not die of old age. The castle filled out with cries as the brains of every mind-controlled slave returned to the moment just before being slaved. "This won't be the last time we make love, I swear to you," he whispers, while hastily zipping up his pants. The door shuts, and I am once again alone in the darkness of the cooler. Throw a coin down a well, and you should only hear silence. Throw a person down a well, and you definitely shouldn't hear it ask for a second one. By remembering him, we keep him alive, my wife told our son. Now I wish they would forget me, so my spirit can finally be free to move into the afterlife. After 3 boys, you must be desperate for a girl this time. People joked to me throughout my pregnancy. As the baby gave its first cry, the midwife read the question in my eyes and shook her head sadly as she turned towards the incinerator. "I know you can't sleep," I told my excited kids at 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, "but Santa will still bring you everything you asked for if you just lie still and quiet." "Thank God they still believe," my husband whispered to me, as we listened to the heavy footsteps moving through the house. "We are a natural breeding center. Therefore, we don't allow any of the chemicals they used to use, as it may hurt the pups." Despite the screaming in the background, I was relieved that my new pet human would be natural and pure. A dying man pushed something into my hands. He told me I must use it. I'm sure, one day when it's most important, I'll find a use for this EpiPen. Every morning, my wife gives me a bowl of cat food, and if I don't eat, she shoves my head in it and chases me outside with a brush. I should have never said, "I wish my wife treated me half as good as she treated that cat," while holding that lamp. Being a twin was great until adulthood, when my sister surpassed me in every way imaginable. But I won in the end, when I walked into her home, and her husband and kids greeted me, never knowing she was even gone. The CDC has just released the 4 scariest words mankind has ever heard. Rabies has gone airborne. Hello, I know this is awkward, but you're my biological mother through my parents' in vitro fertilization. I stared in shock at the young woman who looked so strikingly like me, because I don't remember ever having been an egg donor. "Why are you doing this to me?" I screamed when they ripped out another nail. Leaning in close, my torturer grinned and whispered, "Knowing there is a reason, but not what that reason is half the fun." After a solid month of our daughter crying about a monster peering in through her bedroom window, my husband had the idea of making a trap. His name was Kenneth Smith. He lived down the street from us for years. After my toddler ingested the whole bottle of pills, I called poison control and quickly read off the ingredients listed on the label. "Transferring you to the coroner's office," said the voice on the line. As the stranger made Mommy scream and cry, the bright 4-year-old picked up the phone and dialed 911. "You're one of Elmo's best friends," the toy phone replied.
"Last time, Daddy beat me up because I accidentally paid the store clerk more, but this time I will count properly," I thought to myself. I reached into my pocket to get the money, but found nothing but a hole. The painkillers helped after I found out my husband and doctor secretly gave me a husband stitch after the birth of my first child. The pills knocked them both right out, and I used the needle and thread to sew their own stitches into their urethras. I sat in the hospital and tried to focus on the rhythmic beeping of my infant son's heart as I ignored my crazy mother's ranting about government conspiracies. But when I came back later, I heard only silence as my mother smiled and said she unplugged some things to prevent the 5G radiation from spreading.
Returning home from my daughter's funeral, I paused at the front door, sobbing, and begged God to please take away the pain. As I stepped through the door, I paused, confused about where all the unfamiliar toys and clothes strewn about the room had come from. An abandoned asylum is about to be renovated, and the last personnel shut down an antique machine. Before he leaves, he heard a disembodied voice crackled from the intercom. "Thank you for releasing me." "These drills are such bullshit. Schools almost never catch on fire," I groaned. As I hear a loud bang and watch the girl in front of me fall to the ground, I start to question why the principal's voice sounded different when we were told it was just a drill from over the intercom. I walked through the front door to find my wife, blood oozing from jagged slashes in her wrists, and a graphic video of me with another woman playing on the computer screen behind her. As I cradled her body and wept, a new email alert popped up on the screen with the subject, "Hi Shane, we've just sent you a free customized Ultimate Fantasy trademark sample video produced by our cutting-edge generative AI created just using your profile pic." For her surprise birthday party, my psychic friend was going to lure my mother to the basement where the guests were hiding, with a made-up story about sensing a body being buried down there. After a few moments of silence, we heard my mother shout, "You'll never find the other one," followed by the sound of a gunshot. "And the triangle goes in the green hole. Good job, Eva," said Amy, with a proud pat on the back. Turning to the colonel, Amy continued, 3 minutes into training, the model has a 2-year-old spatial ability. In 2 hours, this entire floor of EVAs can be mission capable." I angrily shouted at the doctor, "Just because you can't hear the voices doesn't mean you can say categorically that they aren't real." The doctor calmly replied, "And just because I am one of those voices doesn't mean I automatically have to agree with you." The cops wouldn't do anything about my stalker ex-boyfriend, even after he broke into my house to steal my toothbrush, so I was relieved when he just abruptly moved on and left me in peace. It's been years now, but my heart almost stopped when I ran into him in town today, walking hand in hand with a little girl who looks just like I did as a child. My girlfriend was a revolutionary scientist, and when she asked me to participate in one of her experiments, I accepted on the spot. I no longer know where my body ends or where the machine begins. My girlfriend always promised she'd stay by my side, even in death. I just wish she hadn't meant it literally, I thought, as her mangled corpse tightened its grip around my waist in bed. After inventing a time machine, the first place I decided to visit was Imperial Rome 2,000 years ago. My last thought as I succumbed to the cold and vacuum of deep space was to remember that the Earth, the Sun, even the Milky Way galaxy are all moving. "When I snap my fingers, you will all think you are Olympic divers," the stage hypnotist said, as she swung her pocket watch back and forth in front of our eyes. A few minutes later, I lined up with the other gold medal hopefuls on the hotel's rooftop. When the man met his autistic niece for the first time, she pointed at him and kept repeating the number 26 again and again. The man had no idea how she knew, but at that moment, he made up his mind that she would be his 27th victim. When a patient enters my surgery, accompanied by a faint buzzing sound, my first assumption is a sex toy mishap. A colonic wasp nest therefore made quite the surprise. The doctors told me they had feared I'd get amnesia after that head wound, but I can remember my life perfectly. It's just not the same life everyone else seems to remember. It's December 13th, 2058, and I've been called to a scene of a half-naked woman with no signs of a struggle. It's been so long since we've had sub-zero temperatures that people are starting to forget what hypothermia looks like. "Is there anyone that you want to save before I turn everyone in the land to dust?" the genie asked, pointing towards the man's children. "No," he said, walking away to the sound of their agonizing screams, not realizing his mistake until he felt an intense heat all over his body. On my deathbed, I admitted to my husband I was a serial killer. My husband, in my last moments, smiled at me and whispered, "Who did you think cleaned up after all your messes?" So you were never caught, sweetheart. For the millionth time, don't look at the eclipse without your glasses, I snapped. In the 6th hour of sunless twilight, it's getting harder to maintain my decorum in front of the kids. We have your wife at gunpoint. You can save her by sending $5,000, the email read. Yeah, right. No way you put her back together for that, I chortled under my breath as I reported it as spam. Bad girl, I scolded my new dog for biting me as I reached for the paddle. She opened her mouth to scream for help when I grabbed her by her blonde ponytail, but I had already removed her tongue days ago. Grandma, you're just imagining things again because of your dementia. No one is going to hurt you. Why does everyone believe a child when she says she got molested, but no one believes us when we are old and frail? We'll find the other survivors, sweetie. Not everyone is turned, she said frantically, shoving supplies into a bag. I know, Mommy, but where are they hiding? Her son asked, sneakily wiping the black ooze from his ear. We need to go. Enemy soldiers are coming, said the woman, as her husband put their crying infant in the crib. Almost done, said the husband, as he hid several grenades and rigged them up to explode as soon as the crying infant was picked up. My daughter looked at the gradient of color on my arms, admiring the hues, and said, Mommy, when can I have pretty colors too? Very soon, I think, I said, trembling, as my husband stumbled drunkenly through the front door with his wooden bat. Wow, those guys sure can eat, my buddy laughed as he watched our emaciated charges. Maybe we should tell them to slow down a bit. Nah, a bit of indulgence won't kill them. And if anyone deserves to gorge themselves, it's someone who just escaped the camps, I replied. I'm immortal, she thought to herself. But you can still feel pain, correct? The commissar said, buckling her to the chair. Why did no one else climb into this lifeboat? Asked the little kid as the ship sank. This is not a lifeboat, and everyone else survived, replied the only other person on the boat. The man escorted the heavily intoxicated woman to the car, eagerly anticipating the morning after. Damn, that bitch sure didn't disappoint, he panted breathlessly, furiously masturbating to the news of a drunk driver plowing through a crowded street of partygoers. What is it, Dad, aliens? His son asked excitedly next to him as he stared at the video feed from his telescope. The man watched in horror as thousands of large tentacles undulated in and out of Jupiter's atmosphere. My wife was understandably upset at my demands for a maternity test. No matter how hard I tried, though, I just couldn't remember her being pregnant or giving birth. Another message popped up on my phone. This time it said, kill everyone or die, and I just wanted to get home safe, so I did. So you're telling me that you stole a car and mowed down 20 people because you thought the game your grandson downloaded on your phone was real? The cop asked. My colleagues in the agency tried to stop me, but I evaded them and quickly killed the man destined to become the worst dictator of the 20th century. The vile Erdolf von Hohenstein will now never topple the Weimar Republic and never cause millions of pointless deaths in his 3 brutal and bloodly years of fruitless conquest. After starting Ambulatrin, Zoe's nightmares of twisted metal and shattered glass began fading, and she could even drive again. Humming a lullaby, Zoe gently fastened the straps on her daughter's empty car seat. I remember the day the immortality elixir was invented. They practically gave it away. Now that I sit here on the street, my body is filled with agony. At age 187, I pray that one day I will have enough money to buy my death. Finally, I can obtain retribution for my son's death. 30 years ago, my son was killed accidentally by another kid, and yesterday, that kid became a father. My wife wept as the doctor told her our daughter wouldn't survive past birth and should be aborted. Buying his cooperation hadn't been cheap, but my firstborn will be a son, no matter what. My friend asked to borrow something from my closet that her evangelical parents won't let her have. I have no problem with the request, but it's hella awkward trying to fit a wire hanger into my school backpack. I've been taking care of Miss Ellie for years in the nursing home. She has always been slow, but very independent. Got worried about her being in the bathroom by herself for so long that I popped the lock and caught her struggling with the zipper on her wrinkly old skin suit. When I was a toddler, a drug-addled homeless woman ran up to my father, ripped me from his embrace, and sprinted away. She knew she couldn't physically stop my father from jumping off the overpass, but thanks to her, I didn't die with him. After sex, I always feel guilty. It's difficult to continue the autopsy afterwards. I have to remind myself that I'm the only veterinarian in the city. After my latest failed attempt, I awoke in the hospital to the smiling faces of my family and the doctor saying I was lucky to be alive. As the doctor left the room, all smiles faded, and my mother said, in her typical dismissive tone, "I guess you can't even die right." I've been able to see a tornado out of my window for the last 10 minutes. I'm not worried though. It hasn't looked like it's moving for a while. My parents lied when they said it would be fun to have a baby brother, so I'm sending him back where he came from. I am not sure what temperature they had him at originally, but Mom usually bakes buns at 425, and he stopped crying pretty quick, so that must have worked. I was grateful when my captor offered me food after 3 days of torture. I've never heard of an anguish pair before, but it must be better than starving. What I was about to do would be a violation of the trust my patient put in me, as well as the law. But knowing she was sound asleep, so innocent and vulnerable, I just couldn't stop myself. "I'm sorry to wake you," I said to the sleepy woman on the other end of the phone. "But your husband is a patient of mine, and you need to get out of the house before he gets home." Now that we've fully transitioned to self-driving cars, I had assumed traffic jams would be a thing of the past, but it's like a parking lot on the highway, and I can't unlock the open lane unless I upgrade to premium. If you need some extra D6, feel free to grab a few dice from one of the board games on the shelf in the other room, the DM advised the D&D group. When the elephants came bulldozing through the living room, realization and dread struck his face when he realized which game I borrowed my set of dice from. "Daddy, who's that skinny-looking man in the background?" asked my daughter as we watched the Artemis 3 moon landing live. I thought she was just being silly until news came out that hundreds of thousands of children had also seen it during the stream. "She's just a dog. Ignore her barking and she'll quieten down." I stared at my owner, then walked away. Walking on all fours was becoming easier and my bark was sounding more real. The doctor told me I had been legally dead for 1 minute and 15 seconds. 75 seconds was all it took for me to know no man, woman, or child deserves the horrors of what comes next. "You really took a wrong turn, didn't you?" my wife said from the back seat of the car as I drove through the woods. "Jesus!" I screamed as I drove off the road, for I had buried her 10 minutes ago. As a male doctor, I had always assumed the sobbing women were just being overdramatic as I put the IUDs in, and I told them the pain was worth it to not get pregnant. Now, as I scream and a group of women holding me down force the T-shaped piece of plastic up my urethra, I'm realizing I should have given them actual painkillers during their procedures. "The neural implant will eliminate Lily's seizures," smiled the neurologist. Seeing us exchange glances, he added, "If cost is a concern, the ad-supported base model is very affordable." The doctor didn't believe me when I said I had parasites, so I decided to prove it. I wish he'd stop freaking out about how much blood I'm losing and look at the weird red worms I pulled out of my arm. Despite what the veterinarian said, you bullishly stuck to your beliefs, confident that you knew what was best for your pets. As the cats sniffed weakly at yet another raw vegan meal, you tell yourself you're only imagining the bones jutting visibly beneath their patchy fur. "Okay," I heard Alexa say from the other room, responding to a command. I hadn't spoken, and no one else was home. "That was close," I said, swerving away from oncoming traffic. The cold eyes of my fiancée froze me in place as she reached over and steered us back into the stream of headlights. When the soldiers came into our village, my wife grabbed our newborn son, and I grabbed some valuables as we fled towards the forest. While hiding in the forest, my wife said, "Take this bag and give me the child." "Lips on the tip, Molly," the supervisor snapped her mantra. I always licked the brush before painting each radium watch dial. Today I was just distracted by that damn toothache. After Superman disappeared, some people said that he had gone undercover to expose some organ trafficking ring. But after my retinal transplant, when I was able to use X-ray, telescopic, and microscopic vision, I realized what had happened to him. I scrolled down the terms of service without reading and tapped, "I've read the TOS and agree." I wish I'd seen the clause that legally allowed them to steal the soul from my body. The monk instructed us to not look back as we walked away from the lowering casket. I could hear something trying to sound like my grandmother, begging me to turn around. The ship's crew assured the passengers everything was good. A few hours later, most of the passengers had drowned or frozen to death because there weren't enough lifeboats. For my final meal, they gave me tons of food, anything I wanted and more, and I was glad that at least I wouldn't die hungry. Then they tossed me back in my cell, and they never came back. Sir, ma'am, I regret to inform you that your son has failed his government-issued IQ test. Due to his scores being in the 99th percentile, under the Equal Intelligence Act, he has been scheduled for an immediate lobotomy. Ever since the superhero has started protecting our city, 99% of women feel safe and secure. The remaining 1% are those women who he takes with him as payment. She was not fat. She was pregnant, said one friend. No, she was just fat and you won't get any extra point for killing her, said his friend as their unit marched towards the next village. My rescue dog has never met a person he doesn't love, even despite the scars and trauma he still carries. So why does he tremble and cower every time my new boyfriend comes over, as if he's seen him before? I coughed up a bit of string and figured I should pull it out. I didn't consider it wasn't string until I had pulled out over 5 feet and saw it wriggling. The first thing we taught the AI machines was the first law of robotics. They may not injure a human being. The second thing we taught them was that certain groups aren't really human. I broke down when the policeman came to the door, bearing the news that my daughter was found dead, with 13 people's DNA found inside her. Who was going to earn me my next paycheck? When the mistress claimed my husband was hers, and they were meant to be, I sent her a special gift. After castrating him, let's see if he's still her man. I don't need a husband, but my kids need a father. The woman put both of her daughters in the lifeboat and stayed on the ship. Hopefully the people on the boat will be enough for the monster and it will stop chasing, said the captain. You are manually breathing and blinking right now. Thanks to this device, you willingly strapped yourself in. The obese woman was long dead, but it was clear the man was still force-feeding her twitching corpse. You're beautiful, he crooned, pulling back the quilt covering her belly, where a gaping mouth opened greedily between the reeking folds of sheets and fat. I contacted the hitman, telling him to cancel the plan to kill my husband. Sneaking up behind him and tickling him right as he's about to swallow a vitamin worked out just fine. Her face fell as I went in for a kiss. I think it's time I bury her. I finally prevented World War II, the elated time traveler exclaimed. His bloodied finger tapped the final checkbox on his pad marking Baby Churchill, Baby Roosevelt, and Baby Stalin as deceased. I want to go back in time to when I was most happiest, I said to the benevolent genie, as my one and only wish. Filled with absolute glee that I found a genie's bottle, I began to wonder what I was going to wish for. Am I going to die? She asked the doctor. He dropped another of her organs into the jar and assured her, not today. No, doctor. I will never consent to euthanasia, my husband said stubbornly. My hospice doctor gave me a helpless look and prescribed more useless medication as I screamed at her to take me out of this constant, hellish pain.
Did you have an affair while you were abroad? My brother asked when I told him that I might have children outside of my marriage. Not an affair, but my squad did visit a lot of remote settlements during the war, I replied. I pointed at the candies on the counter asking, Dad, can I have 4 of those please? While my other hand showed 4 fingers. As I curled the 4 fingers around my thumb, I hoped the cashier knew the sign and my dad didn't. In lieu of the death penalty, I was to be sentenced to an experimental drug trial, through which I would be subjected to 1 hour of eternity. I have spent the last 10 billion years staring at the same 4 walls, begging for death but unable to die, and my sentence has not even begun. I looked into the eyes of the dog I abandoned years ago, and I knew he recognized me. As he guided his handler away from my body in the rubble without alerting, I regretted leaving him on the side of the road. The zombie apocalypse ended decades after it began, society creating a cure, until the people emerged from the bunkers, their bodies containing the original strain. Go home and get some rest, I told my team. It's nearly midnight, and you'll be no good to those trapped miners if you're working on fumes. The rep from the Army Corps of Engineers had assured me they had enough oxygen to last up to, 200 hours, over 8 days, and it's not like they would starve before morning. I invented a time machine so I could go back in time to change my husband's mind about suicide. When I arrived back in the present, I smiled while reading his obituary, knowing he wouldn't live on to kill all of those innocent people. My favorite comic book, my favorite necklace, the puppy I rescued, my favorite toy, and that's my best friend, my wife said with a smile. With childlike enthusiasm, my wife explained what everything was after we dug up her time capsule. "What is this thing called, Daddy?" squealed my young son, wonder blazing in his little eyes as he pointed excitedly at the figure on the page. As I smiled at his awe and innocence, I bittersweetly replied, "We called those trees, and they used to be everywhere." I think my husband is making me sick. Knowing the fridge has been on the fritz, I probably should have thrown the rest of him away. Searching through the wreckage of another ruined city, I finally got lucky when I found mounds of enough warm white rice to stave off starvation for another day. Shoving a handful into my mouth, I felt the little grains writhe and squirm against my tongue, but I told myself it was just my imagination as I swallowed hard and took another bite. After I was convicted, they put me inside the machine where I would relive my victim's last moments as a punishment. They stopped the machine when they noticed my erection. She was only 16 when they buried her, a few hours older when she died.
When the apocalypse finally arrived, I wondered which common object society would choose to replace our paper currency. Bottle caps, paper clips, and countless other trinkets were trialed. But never in my wildest nightmares did I think we would settle on human eyes. After the food had been eaten, the man grinned gleefully as he waited for the drama to begin. Having only one toilet in a house full of lactose-intolerant people, the revenge for them tricking him into eating meat would be sweet. In order to hide my drinking problem from my family, I've been putting liquor in regular juice. I came out of the bathroom to see my husband helping my toddler finish the last 3/4 of my heavily poured vodka and apple juice. "Finally!" I exclaimed. "After 2 long years, my masterpiece is almost complete. It just needs a little bit of red," I thought, standing in front of the canvas with my loaded gun. "Is that the venomous one?" he asked, clutching his bite. "Don't worry, red and yellow, he's your fellow." I love sexual predators, especially pedophiles. No one cares when they end up missing. "So nice to enjoy a nap at the beach while he's watching our son," she thought. "So nice to enjoy a nap at the beach while she's watching our son," he thought. There is nothing after death, no God, no afterlife, just empty eternity. But don't worry, your existence will continue.
I thought that since I was pregnant now, my husband wouldn't lay his hands on me anymore. I was relieved until I found a notebook detailing every failure I made, beginning the day I told him I was expecting.
I hadn't seen anyone in days and felt the human race had completely vanished. But after calling out one last time, I finally heard a voice call back. I followed it until I came to a clearing in the woods. But when I looked around, all I found was a recording device, playing my own voice back at me. The Bible said humans aren't meant to live past 120 years, but I'm to turn 122 tomorrow. I wonder if God has forgotten me. "I'll kill you for killing my wife," said the father, before rushing towards the crib. The newborn, who had already killed his mother and 2 nurses, did not hesitate to kill his father too. After years of study, the amateur necromancer finally felt ready to animate her first skeleton. But when the incantation was complete, and the bones on the altar remained lifeless, she thought the ritual a failure, until she started to feel an uncomfortable squirming beneath her skin.
I recited the ancient words that would curse my ex-best friend's entire family and lineage. The doctors told my wife that our son had passed away due to SIDS, and I am determined to take the truth to the grave with me. Mummy helped me make an Easter garden for my school project, using whatever natural materials we found. But apparently the teachers didn't like the crucified frogs, and now nobody will tell me when I can go home. Daddy said to Mommy hiring a professional to clean out septic tank was expensive, so I decided I could do it for him. But as I fell in, I wished I at least did it when someone was home. The fallout shelter hadn't been occupied by humans in decades. As I descended miles below the surface of the earth, I realized the lights were on. I can't believe I've binged 5 episodes of this awful show, but I don't think the intruder standing behind me knows that I can see him in the screen's reflection, and I don't want to find out what will happen if he realizes that I know he's there.
As we started to dissect the alien corpse, we marveled at how different yet familiar his body was. "What does NASA mean?" my colleague asked, examining the faded emblem on the alien's primitive spacesuit. "Please don't let it into the baby's room. That's not our dog!" shouted the hysterical wife, as a canine's tail disappeared into the hallway behind her. "Honey, please calm down. You're not making any sense," soothed her husband. But at that moment, the playful barking that emanated from the nursery began to warp and twist into a hideous laugh. "Mommy, baby Jack can swim all by himself," my 4-year-old exclaimed, beaming with pride. "He float with his face down," she added, pointing to the pool. I stuffed a pencil up my nose and went to find my girlfriend, knowing it would gross her out. I tripped. I never thought I would miss colors of all the things in this world. Trapped in this room devoid of colors, I feel myself going insane. I've covered the walls with my blood and feces, but they always clean it up when I'm unconscious. You aren't born with a fear of the dark, but most people forget how they got it. I cautiously tell my father, "Dad, this food tastes funny," as he brushes the hair away from my ear. His trembling voice whispers, "Just eat, honey," tears streaming down his face, and I realized the layoff had twisted something deep within him. "You're under arrest," the officer told me, putting me in the back of his car. The thoughts of what I was arrested for quickly stopped when I realized that this wasn't the way to the station, and fear soon washed over me when we had stopped in the middle of nowhere. They always said pets would eat you when you died, but when I fell and became paralyzed, I realized you didn't need to be dead. I went to sleep with everyone else, but then, to my surprise, I woke up because I had to pee. "There is something wrong with my hibernation pod," I kept screaming from inside, but no one came to open the pod. As the 5 small children sat by their 2 beaming parents, looks of cherubic contentment across their sweet faces, the youngest boy suddenly sneezed. "Ruin another take, and you won't eat tonight," snapped his mother, her saintly facade shattering like glass into a familiar look of venom as she moved to readjust the camera. "I'm going to open you up, scoop out your insides, and feed them to my pigs, you fucking whore," as I hid in the closet. That was the last intelligible thing I heard my dad shout before the screaming started. "I'm so sorry," my wife cries hysterically to the judge. "If my sister hadn't lied about having an affair with my husband, I would have never chopped his genitals off." I was collecting eggs during the egg hunt when my guardian angel appeared in a flash. "Put it back without touching the pin and leave it for the other kids," she said, pointing at the strange egg I had just picked up. "I want to enroll my 9-year-old in pre-ballet classes, but she refuses to learn ballet," I said with frustration. "Don't worry, with the new technology, we can change her preferences, and she won't even notice," the doctor said with a smile. When my little sister clawed at her throat and gasped for breath, I started Googling frenetically. She still persisted after I shoved the Wikipedia page in her face and said, "It says here that peanuts aren't nuts, they are legumes." I watched in horror as my coworkers began jumping out of the 14th story window to their deaths before I decided to lock the windows, stopping anyone else from committing suicide. The last few people stared at me as their skin began melting from the fire that had already gotten up the stairs. I've been living in a small room with my friend for my entire life, and today my arms could finally touch both opposite walls. I was happy until my friend told me that arms do not grow longer. I found my son crying after he buried his dog. "Next time, before disrespecting me, remember that you have 2 more pets," I said as I walked away. "Look what I can do," he sang to the baby, rhythmically snapping his fingers. When he ran out of fingers to snap, he moved on to the boy's wrists. At school last week, I shoved that nerdy kid into a locker. They found him this morning because the hallway was starting to smell. In accordance with the law which states 1 involuntary death for each new birth, you have been algorithmically chosen for forced euthanasia on April 9th, 24 at 10:45 a.m. Please arrive 15 minutes before your appointment and bring this notice, and don't run. I couldn't believe the man who had raped me was given custody of our newborn daughter. The judge's reasoning was, "Well, you did try to get rid of her." Where exactly is she? I asked, determined to lose my virginity tonight. Hold your horses, I'm asking again, my friend said, as he handed me the shovel and put the Ouija board on the cemetery ground. After seeing my stalker's suicide note that said, "I win," I moved thousands of miles away and changed my name. That didn't stop the radio from playing her voice singing, "Ain't no mountain high enough," and every step you take on every frequency. I tucked my son into bed and turned off the lights, but as I walked away, I heard him say, "Who was that man in the corner?" I turned back to his empty room and replied, "What man?" I tried to kill my wife after I was told she poisoned my food, and I started vomiting. But it was only when my daughter topped up my drink, and I started feeling woozy, that I realized that she was just trying to get rid of us both. The anesthesiologist said, "Let's count back from 10, and you won't feel any pain." When I got to 6, he leaned in close and whispered, "You won't feel anything, ever again." "You're not my mother," I hiss at the woman who has been impersonating her all day. The woman smiles and whispers, "I'm not, but we both know you're not their real daughter either." I've been driving for hours, making sure I was always going above 40 miles per hour, because I know the guy crouching in the back seat is waiting for the perfect moment. Even though I always give my victims a 30-second head start, they never escape. I suppose once you have one of their children, they are always tied to them, even when you cut the tie. "Relax. This is the 21st century. Nobody's going in an oven," the camp guard elaborated. "These days we have microwaves and air fryers." "Serial killers are much rarer these days," the CIA agent continued, "ever since we shut off the device in the 90s. My face lit up when I saw my wife walk through the door. I knew volunteering at the shelter was a smart idea. The news said they found the killer's address. When they read out my exact address, I was horrified, turning slowly to my wife in the kitchen. The fortune teller told me I'd be dead by the end of the day. I scoffed, only to see the gun she was pulling out from under the table. The first EMT said, "He's got the right blood type and he's listed as an organ donor. Worth a shot?" The second nodded grimly and replied, "For my little girl, absolutely, but we'll have to make it look like we tried." Shouldn't you, give me some Novocaine first or something?" I asked nervously, watching the dentist reach for her drill. She fixed me with a stern look as it whirred to life and said, "Anesthesia is for patients who take care of their teeth. I understand you're in tremendous pain, but try to remember that I will spare your daughter's life if your final words manage to surprise me." With his raw flesh mostly flayed of skin, even to breathe was shivering agony, but between gasps, he managed to wiggle his toes and say, "You missed a spot." I felt like the luckiest man in the world, because not only was my fiancée smart and beautiful, we shared the same values and saved sex for marriage. In our honeymoon suite, I asked her why I still hadn't met her twin, and she said she was always with us right here, and in between her legs was a blinking face with teeth. "You are the adopted one, loser," my sibling yelled at me, not knowing because of my illness. My parents got her as a replacement. "I've always had aquaphobia, and the only reason why we have a pool is because my husband wanted one," I said, with tears in my eyes. That's what I told the police officer when he asked me why I didn't jump into the backyard pool to save my 2-year-old baby. "The monsters under my bed said they're going to kill you tonight," my daughter whispers to me as I tuck her into bed as tightly as I can. I pat her head and give her a reassuring kiss on her forehead. Before I reply, "They were, but they accepted my trade this morning, so try not to struggle too hard." After my brother killed himself, I got a text. "Don't worry, I figured out a loophole." I'm watching his decomposing body writhe, reconfiguring itself like a puzzle box of meat and bone, a kaleidoscope of sinew and screaming teeth. As the camera rolled, the news anchor's voice trembled while reporting on the chaos unfolding at a local high school, her professionalism faltering as the name of the shooter was revealed in her earpiece. Her heart stopped, and the words barely escaped her lips. "The suspect has been identified as my son, Matthew Hawkins." "Select all images with a school bus. instructed the pop-up screen as I clicked on the photos. Targets locked and confirmed, the next screen announced as missiles launched towards them. My daughter's face grew dismayed when I asked where my wife was. It was only after a rare moment of clarity I wondered how many more times I'd burden her with that question, and how many came before. My wife was inconsolable when she woke to find our baby dead beside her this morning. If I had known the dog was going to dig him up like that, I would never have taken him with me when I hid the body. Growing up with domestic violence, I swore I'd die if I ever struck a woman in anger. With her banging on the door, trying to forgive me, I hold the gun, preparing to make good on my promise. I screamed like a banshee when I removed the loose floorboard beneath my bed and found a strange man lay smiling inside a snug little nook. He screamed louder, though, when I nail-gunned the floorboard in place and told him I wouldn't be back at my holiday home till next spring. I found out my daughter's murderer was terrified of being buried alive. It took some time setting up the oxygen and feeding tube systems, but it was worth it. The next caller on the line was a hysterical woman who claimed her daughter had just given birth to the Antichrist. According to the cards, your reading claims you see the truth, and you must remember to cleanse the corruption from your daughter. I smiled, eagerly awaiting tomorrow's headlines. I put the Walther PPK to my head, thinking this is it, before pulling the trigger. Congratulations, you have completed scenario. World War II, timeline number 1148, ending 3, and we hope you had an enjoyable time at Time Travel Fantasy Amusement Park. When the Make-A-Wish Foundation took my daughter and I to Disneyland, we learned character actors don't let go from hugs until the child lets go. I feel horrible for the person inside of that Minnie Mouse costume, having to carry around my daughter's dead body for the rest of their life. It was so challenging for me to tell my best friend how awful she was every day for 3 years. But now, as I tuck my new toddlers into their beds, I know what I did was right. After so many empty years, we thought we'd never have a child. So thank you, doctor, quavered the husband. The doctor's futile cries were muffled by duct tape as the wife, gently cradling his infant daughter, pressed a silenced .22 to his forehead and said, "We'll take good care of her." With advanced fertility technology, our robots have made parenthood a breeze for married couples, so don't worry about this necessary procedure. Against my will, they put the machine on my lower torso that quickly sliced away the defining parts of my manhood. I was visited by death when I was a child, and it left me devastated. He said that he had no quarrel with my kind and that he will never darken my doorstep ever again. Everyone I sleep with dies within 7 days. Well, technically only one person lasted a week. The others couldn't handle more than 48 hours of that kind of pain. I noticed a tiny piece of corn stuck between my 9-month-old son's teeth, so I carefully plucked it out. That's when I learned what an exposed nerve looks like. Yesterday, my daughter told us that a kid in her class bit her. Today, we found out that we could no longer see her in the mirror. "You left your lunch on the counter again, silly," I said as I left a voicemail on his cell phone. If I had just known that those two were in the school library, maybe they would never have found where he was hiding. In disturbing news, a nanny AI bot had been found pinning a toddler to a bloody bed in Seattle, Washington. While the parents cry a desperate outrage against Home AI Inc., the company states that the parents did not update to the model's much safer datasets, which left it to learn from domestic abuse originating in the home. As I entered the apartment where my friends were holding my kidnapped girlfriend, I chuckled and shouted, "April Fools!" The laughter died in my throat as I turned the corner and saw 2 masked men lying still in a pool of blood with my girlfriend nowhere in sight. The patient begged for more pain meds, but the staff tutted and maintained the same dosage. Across the floor, a nurse tried to remember whose pain meds they had already skimmed from. I flung my phone down angrily after the 5th Face ID not recognized. I glanced in the mirror and screamed. You can't kill one Siamese twin and have the other survive. Their circulatory system is way too connected, but you could lobotomize one. I saw you pour the drinks, moron, I said as I drank from the cup he had clearly not poisoned. But did you see me freeze the ice? He smirked as my stomach began to ache. The doctor said autism couldn't be cured, but I started corrections with a belt, and my boy is already becoming nice and quiet. And they lived happily ever after, I concluded as I quietly closed the book and tiptoed away so the children could sleep. Although it had been almost 20 years and I was no longer a bus driver, I still remembered all their names. When the man saw several cops chasing a teenager, he grabbed the teenager and pinned him to the ground. "Thank you for catching patient 0, but we have to take you both," said the cops from a distance. There is only one woman that I ever loved, the only person that I couldn't live without. So when the gunman said choose, I chose her over my children. But like I said to my husband, when he asked me why I saved myself, we can always have more children. You can stay here with your child and you both die, or you can let me take her and you both live, he smirked, lowering his gun. But no matter what the policeman said, she refused to drop the knife and release her daughter before the flames from her burning home consumed them both. My neighbor let me keep his wife's pet parrot after her death. My guilty conscience can be soothed now, knowing the screaming I used to hear was just the bird. "Please free me. I've been trapped in here for so many years," the frail old man pleaded. "Of course I'll save you," the young girl replied, breaking the circle of salt. I wiped my eyes, then cleared my throat and said, "I forgive you," to my child's killer, knowing that his apology was real. Then I sliced off another piece of his liver and said, "If you had just sounded that sincere during your drunk driving trial, we wouldn't be here right now." My uncle gave me a beautiful doll and told me to never cover its eyes. A couple months later, I accidentally dropped it and cracked open its face. That's when the camera fell out. "I've sacrificed so much to be able to get here. What do you mean it's closed?" Smiling wickedly, the demon simply pointed to the "under new management" sign covering the pearly gates. For as long as I've been immortal, I've charged into danger, taken on unfathomable threats, never fearing bodily harm. But nothing could have prepared for the terror that would fill me as Vesuvius erupted, covering me permanently in ash. My son's fortune cookie said he would be betrayed. My daughter said she would be shown mercy. Mine said I would face a difficult choice. A woman approached Asylum's receptionist. "My daughter has been seeing ghosts. I want to commit her." The receptionist looked at the little girl. The girl said, "It's the only way I could get away from her." My pretty young wife loyally held my hand as my organs were shutting down and old age finally claimed me. Her tears were real, and our last moments together were tender and loving. Yet my final thought was still a disturbing one. Weren't we both the same age when we married just a year ago? At the end, the faithful man stood face to face with the Creator and finally asked, "Is it true that you made everyone and everything?" Frowning, the Creator responded, "I thought I did. Who are you?" "How do you torture all the souls you collect?" I asked the devil as I signed on the dotted line. "I reincarnate them," the devil replied with a smile before vanishing. "That's not a funny joke, babe, and you know it. Anyway, he'd never do something like that. He's my friend, and you don't know him like I do." While standing before the gates of hell, the man's sins were read aloud. $10,245 spent in the torture of animals for medical research. $144,345 in the killing of innocent civilians during warfare. $59,800 spent to fund thieving corporations. The list grew long, and the man more confused, until a chill ran down his spine, and he whispered, "Taxes." I thought I was smart to wish for lots of money, immortality, and that only I could kill myself. I regretted my phrasing as I lay dying in a research hospital with a horrific autoimmune disease. I devoured the last scraps of my childhood friend as the old man whispered, "Good boy, you're free." Climbing the basement stairs, I realized the door had never been locked. After slitting the throat of the crazy old hag that had broken into my home, I went to call the police. However, as my unfamiliarly wrinkled and crooked fingers hovered over the dial pad, I couldn't remember the number. Just because your temperature is a bit high doesn't mean you can take a day off of school. You have a test, and I'm sure that the swelling in your tummy will go down and the pain will be gone by the time you even get there. I'm sorry, darling, but the courts granted your father full custody. I couldn't hear my daughter's reply as I held her under the water, but I knew she understood. When the Countess offered to take me, a simple peasant girl, under her care and into her palace, I immediately accepted. After all, who could refuse the chance to live with the great Batory Erzsébet? The creator's voice boomed, "Congratulations! You get to live forever! Existence will transcend to the next phase. All things living and dead will move on, but you will remain." 911, what's your emergency? Just send everyone. Don't be mean to other kids, don't steal their stuff, and don't make the teacher mad, I said to my little daughter as we reached the kindergarten. Also, don't show your fangs, don't get exposed to the sun, and don't drink from the other kids, I added. My therapist told me there's no cure for my violent impulses, so I might as well put them to good use. He suggested I volunteer at an animal shelter and vent on the unadoptables. But when I told him, each kill just makes me want to move on to something bigger, he smiled and asked if I'd ever volunteered at a soup kitchen. "Hey, I remember you," said our fertility doctor, and my stomach felt sick when I recognized him as my tormentor from high school. I tried not to bear a grudge and keep an open mind, but that was until I saw that my child looked just like him, along with several of his other patients' kids in town. My wife died when our daughter was 5 years old. "Get dressed, we're gonna visit Mommy," I said to my daughter, as I try my best not to laugh whilst loading the shotgun. "The good news," the doctor said, "is that your daughter's brain tumor is operable. The bad news is the cancer is attached to her optic nerves, so we need to remove her eyes." I received a text from my best friend saying, "Help, I'm locked in the basement." When I rushed to their house, I found them waiting for me outside, pale and trembling, insisting they never sent the message. "I'm so close," I thought, as my fingers slipped inside my body. The doctor had promised no side effects from the new medication, but my bones have been itchy ever since I started it. TwoSentenceHorror. As the leader of a survivor group during zombie apocalypse, I decided not to take the guy in the wheelchair with us, but I did decide to take the wheelchair with us once I discovered that it was solar power assisted and could go up to 10 mph. "I wonder what's taking so long," I said out loud, finally deciding to head down to the cellar. I saw my family laying down amongst the potatoes for a nap, so I decided to hide in the room and scare them when they woke up. Immortal youth, not immortality. As I lost my ability to see, hear, and move my body over time with old age, I never stopped wishing that I had been more specific in my request to the genie. "Your memories from when you were a baby and toddler are not gone. They're just not accessible. Going by what my parents, uncles, and aunts have told me about those really early years, I'm extremely grateful that those memories are safely locked away." As I free fall, I hear his words. "I love your girlfriend more than I thought. Sorry." Then he pulls the cord on his parachute and disappears upwards, while mine cannot be opened. I told my stepson not to touch the cookies, but of course, he could never resist sweet things. The important thing was that people had heard me say it. When his peanut allergy kicked in, the coroner would assume it was just a tragic accident. My brother told me he'd kill anyone who hurt me. When I woke up from my coma, I learned that he committed suicide. I couldn't hold back my anger any longer as I yelled at the priest, "Just because I'm goth does not mean that I'm a demon." But I smiled, and I spoke when he went pale. "But you made a lucky guess." "Yo, bro, I swear, she won't be able to resist you like this. Come on in." He takes me in and shows me my crush, laying lifeless on the floor. I accidentally took a picture of my daughter using Google Lens. After multiple attempts, I still can't figure out why it keeps pulling up myths about demonic fairies. The devil appeared before me and presented me with a list of all the sins I would commit over the course of my life. I was surprised there were so few, until he offered me a pen and said, "If you want to live forever, just keep adding to the list." Oh, every time my cat disappears, I just get another one and name it the same name. I think we're up to Snowball 11 now, aren't we? Mrs. Todd chuckles. "Yes, that's right, Mum," replied Fred 8. I looked across the playground and saw my daughter giggle at her hair floating around her face. As I screamed her name, the rain began to fall. The ship's crew noticed me on the beach of the uninhabited island and sent a boat to rescue me. Before I left with them, I secretly left a note for my husband that said, "Take good care of our kid." They told me to kill myself, I said while laying on the hospital bed. So they had to die with me, I said to the officer while explaining why I poisoned my family with nerve poison. Right as you begin to drift off to sleep, you are awakened by the sound of a phone notification cutting through the silence of your dark bedroom. Your phone is dead. His OCD got so horrendously sadistic that he knew the only way to end his suffering was to end his life. But he couldn't because it didn't feel right, and spent the next 60 years unable to end his pain on his own terms until it was taken from him before he was ready. I would have perished in the freezing water after our ship sank, but thanks to my service dog, I was able to find a lifeboat. The people on the lifeboat took me in, but pushed my dog back into the water, saying they needed the space to save other people. Veterans have said one of the most realistic parts of Saving Private Ryan was the dying soldiers calling out for their mommy. I think about that every time I hear about a school shooting. My girlfriend was found dead in the woods, so I went out to find evidence with her father. He had never approved of our relationship, but when he got out his rope, gun, and a few of his friends, I was sure we could find the suspect.
When my wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she said she wished she could be buried with our twins, who disappeared 20 years ago. When she passed and we opened her will, her funeral directives included GPS coordinates to a location deep in a national park.
I just discovered that my husband is cheating on me, so I cut his brake line last night. He left for work early this morning, telling me in a text that he decided to take our baby boy to daycare and save me the trouble. I was horrified when I recognized my daughter on the other end of the suicide hotline. I rolled my eyes as she ranted, lying about my parenting style, deciding to punish her later for everything she said about me. I don't understand. I thought you said hamsters were your favorite. My favorite pet, Andrew, I whimpered, tears welling in my eyes as I looked at the plate in front of me. I could never forget the day when I told my first boyfriend about my pregnancy, and he ghosted me on the same day. So years later, when I got my hands on a time machine, I went back in time and killed him on the exact same day. When he became possessed, my husband began speaking in tongues, moving objects without touching them, and destroyed every religious object in our house. Many of my friends and family have offered to contact the church to set up an exorcism, but I've turned them all down because honestly, it's a welcome change from how he was before.
It will work as long as our daughter believes in it, and we'll save a lot of money, I said to my wife. Trust me, I've read a blog about the placebo effect on the internet, I added, while giving my wife the fake epinephrine injector. I've always loved the sound of the birds along the trail by my house, so I took my girlfriend hiking with me this time to hear it. After an hour of silence, only then did I realize it wasn't until she stepped onto the trail with me that they all decided to stop. By the time the search party got close to the missing kid, he had fallen asleep due to exhaustion. Everyone kept calling the kid's name, but with no battery left in his hearing aids, the kid just kept sleeping. My parents didn't let me get seconds at dinner, and they hid all the snacks in that stupid bear safe, pretty quick thinking that I hid that cheeseburger in my pocket on the way out of the mess hall. My son suffered a long and gruesome death, and afterwards, I buried him. My mistake, it was the other way around. Choking up on the phone, I told my husband that I just found my sister dead from suicide. He gasped and said, "Why on earth would Pamela hang herself?"
I drove all day through the scorching desert, racing towards the spot where the kidnapper promised I would find my baby daughter. When I opened the box I found, it only contained a note that read, "She was alive when I put her in your trunk this morning. I've opened an exotic meats restaurant, and if you can identify the animal, the meal is free. Although if you identify the source of one particular item on the menu, you end up in the secret basement." "Are we going to dig coal or something?" asked one of the teens after they were told to prepare for mine work. "No, all of you will walk through the minefields to make a safe passage for the rest of us," replied the village elder. I was shocked when my online girlfriend showed up at my door. I never gave her my address. Mommy said to call 911 if she is ever hurt, but I hung up when someone answered because Mommy also said to never talk to strangers. I asked a genie to make me the richest person in my wealthy family, and the genie agreed. I danced on the way home, expecting all the dollars and gems to be like my family members, before opening the door where I would thereafter see all the hanging corpses swinging from the internal balcony. Before my little girl came back from school, I tied a rope around my neck and hung myself. After a few hours, I jolted back to life and heard my little girl ask, "Why did you think hanging yourself would work if poison didn't?" My stepdaughter cried for the entire evening in my room and told me how people were mean to her. After she left my room, I went to her social media page and posted some more mean remarks from my throwaway accounts. My fingers were raw and bloody, but I kept typing and typing, working endlessly on my 6th novel. The woman behind me kept whispering to me what to write, not letting me stop until her story had been shared with the world.
For fun, my mom used to lock me outside at night and tell me I was going to be taken if I didn't find my way back inside, laughing at my cries of terror. She was inconsolable after they found my naked body by the river.
After my husband repeatedly told me that he had no memory of beating me up while he was drunk, I decided to get drunk to conform his story. I woke up the next day with a splitting headache and a dead husband, but had no memory of what had happened.
My mom congratulated me on a hard-fought football game as I headed up the stairs to bed. I wonder why her words came out fuzzy. Finding a spider in your bed isn't the worst thing that could happen, unless it's 2 feet wide, munching on your last bag of popcorn while watching Family Feud with its 30 beady eyes, while dressed in your ex's lingerie that she forgot to take with her after the divorce. I was born with the ability to psychically experience the happiest memories of any human by merely touching their skin. I didn't realize this worked with the deceased until the day I felt a rush of joy, along with vivid flashes of somebody's past, just as I bit into a burger from that diner on Route 40. "I love you," my husband said to me, causing me to turn around and smile at him. "We should run away together," he continued, my face going white as I realized he had my phone in one hand, reading my texts aloud, and a gun in the other. My roommate kept stealing my salt, so I replaced it with sugar to teach him a lesson. After I hadn't seen him for 4 days, I broke into his room to find a circle of salt around his messy bed, covered in tiny, caramelized hoofprints. As a 6-year-old, I always thought I had my whole life ahead of me, but as I lay in my bed, getting sicker and weaker, eating nothing but my mother's homemade soup, I realized I was just lucky to have such a doting parent who always took care of me and my weird illnesses. I wished to the genie that $100 would appear in front of me just by thinking about it, but only when no one's looking. Weeks later, after announcing to everyone I'll be having a yacht party, I excitedly run to my office, locked it, and thought hard. However, 20 minutes has passed, and not one bill has appeared.
There was a serial killer on the loose, and as a slim brunette with freckles, I fit their reported physical preferences to the T. When a girl who matched my appearance waved me down for a ride, we chuckled about being a safe bet because we both perfectly matched the criteria, but she didn't notice until it was too late that my freckles were drawn on.
When my nephew showed up at my door unannounced and covered in blood, I asked him what had happened. With unrestrained excitement, he replied, "Remember when you said I could live with you if my parents died?" I told my ex's mother that I wanted to reconcile and tricked her into revealing my ex's new address. When I entered the house through the back door, I didn't find my ex, but her mother was there with a shotgun. The ghost terrified and haunted every person who moved into the house, but one family stubbornly refused to leave. He watched in despair as the next door neighbor broke in through the back window to kill them, just as he'd done with him. I called my ex, told her I was still in love with her, and pulled the trigger. As I woke up blind and in agony, I begged the nurses to finish the job.
2-sentence horror stories.
The captain drew a shaky breath as another body floated by. "Air traffic control, something very, very wrong is happening." Ever since I'd got a job at this shopping mall, the mannequins always gave me the creeps. One day, as I watched the police cracking them open, I learned that some employees hadn't really been fired. After years being taken care for at home, I finally regained my sight. But now, I have to pretend to still be blind while I try to find who are these people and what have they done to my real family. The tribe leader condemned my newly born son, whom I just delivered, to death due to the birthmark on his back being an indicator of a terrible omen. As I approached my dead child in tears, I held his battered and stoned body in my arms, only to smudge the mark with my hand. She held her daughter's charming little drawing and asked, "So you think our new baby is going to be a boy?" "No, Mummy. The baby is blue because she's dead," she replied with a smile. Death handed me 3 dice, explaining that my roll would determine where I deserved to go. I didn't understand what the results of the first 2 dice meant, but the answer became clearer when the final die refused to stop rolling. I must be a good boy. I must be a good boy. The dog kept repeating to himself. After being told so many times not to bark, he remained silent as he watched the serial killer silently sneak in through the window. With the final shuttle about to leave Earth, I made sure to leave an hour early to make it on time. As I watched the distant rockets, I remember that daylight savings time had been canceled this year. My 4-year-old said he wished that people didn't have to knock. I told him about doorbells, and he asked me to install one on his window. In my personal experience, puppies produce more meat than kittens. I've successfully lured more people with puppies than with kittens. I thought for sure my heart condition would kill me, but the doctors have assured me this experimental new heart could keep me alive indefinitely. As I blinked awake in the prison hospital, all I could think about is what 17 consecutive life sentences really means now. My phone kept receiving text messages from an unknown number, each one predicting a tragic event that would happen later that day. The last message simply read, "Your turn."
2-sentence horror stories. My wife was fed up because I spend too much time welding the cage in the basement. I'm just trying to make sure she doesn't get out.
The only time I was told that I was pretty was after the accident. I overheard the doctor say, "What a shame, she was so pretty."
At the cosmonaut's state funeral, I lied when I told his wife he died like a hero, with his last words those of love for her. If she had heard what I heard, his panic at the failing controls, his bitter curses, his animal howls as flesh, steel, and wire all ran together, she would have burned the Kremlin down herself. As we were packing to leave the cabin, I opened the guest book to sign it and was disturbed to find a short entry, written in my handwriting, already there. "This place is so beautiful. My wife and I have decided we're going to stay here forever." After a lot of assurance, the timid kid in my class finally told me all about the abuse he was experiencing at home. "You were right about your son being a big blabbermouth," I said to the kid's mother later that evening while picking her up for our date. The headmistress tearfully approached the student, explaining there had been a bomb on the plane, and his family did not survive. The boy grinned. "Best money I ever spent." "It's okay. I promise. They're gonna send help soon." I hugged my little brother tighter as the whistle of bombs dropping from the sky, followed by earth-shaking explosions, drew closer. During the family picnic, I told my son to use a fork, because eating off your knife was bad manners. He still had the knife inside his mouth when the football hit him on the back of his head. The professor thought he'd change the world with his new death clock, a device that could accurately predict when somebody was going to die. Disappointingly, he tossed it in the trash, as the broken hunk of junk kept spitting out the same date and time for everybody. All my life, my parents have told me not to open the basement door, but I got curious and disobeyed them. What is that glowing ball in the sky, and why does it hurt my eyes? When the kidnapper made me guess where he kept my daughter, I went for the basement, and he said correct, allowing me to see her. But when I found her severed head in there, I learned that every other choice would have been correct as well. Whenever I considered killing myself to escape my parents' abuse, I'd just recite my mantra, "You don't deserve to die." Ironically, now that they are old, hungry, covered in bed sores, and begging to be put out of their misery, I still have the same mantra. She said last time, "We're stuck in a time loop," which really pisses me off because that's what... I framed the first letter I got as a police officer, from a woman thanking me after I'd supported her through her daughter's suicide. I passed it in my hallway every day for nearly 8 years before realizing the handwriting was the same as on the girl's suicide note.
Our 2-sentence horror. The killer smiled as she stood over her victim, knowing how easily she could get away with this. After all, who in their right mind would suspect an 8-year-old? "Did we just hit a deer?" I asked with horror and confusion. We maintained cruising altitude and soon noticed that thousands of deer were suspended in the air right in front of us.
I nearly vomited when I stepped under the police tape and proceeded into the ruined trailer park, the peppermint oil doing nothing to mask the smell of putrefying bodies in the hot summer sun. "One bear did all this?" I asked uniformed officer, but he replied by stepping aside, partially revealing the body of a grotesque, grisly-like thing with rotting skin and a human face. I thought my husband was a jerk, leaving me and the kids on Christmas Eve without so much as a note. I was horrified when the handyman I hired to find the source of the foul smell pulled a Santa hat out of the chimney 6 months later.
Our 2-sentence horror. Riddled with cancer, I beg the genie, "Please, I wish to be in perfect health." Days later, the withering doctor coughs and mutters, "I don't know why you're even here. You're in perfect health." I was absolutely beyond consolable when I found my wife in our bed with another man I didn't know. After her death 9 years ago, my biggest wish was to see her again, but not like this. After almost a year, I have accepted that even with medication and therapy, the voices in my head will not go away. I just wish that they would say something other than, "Please, wake up."
I installed a nanny cam in my daughter's teddy bear. She may be 35, but that doesn't mean she doesn't need mommy's watchful eye at all times.
My daughter sent me a message. "If you don't cut short your business trip and come back home ASAP, I'm going to kill myself." My wife texted me. I read her diary, so I know that she wants to see you in person one last time before committing suicide. Please don't come home. Got a call from the hospital saying a stranger had severely beaten my wife, but when I showed up, she tearfully admitted she'd been having an affair with the guy for a few months and had actually fallen in love. I stood there shaking. I'm sure she thought from shock, but really I was just pissed that I had risked paying him to seduce her beforehand, only to see him fail at the main point. With one final signature from my wife and a tearful goodbye, I am finally released from the pain of living as the doctor pulls the plug and darkness takes me. My eyes flutter open as the doctor enters with a clipboard, and my wife begins to weep as he explains the paperwork she needs to sign before they can pull the plug. While my father was taking a bath, I stood near his table and began messaging my boyfriend. Just as I suspected, a copy of every message I sent to my boyfriend popped up on my father's phone.
Our two-sentence horror. The serial killer's letter to the police stated that on this date, he would begin killing people using the instruments of their own sins as his murder weapons. And sure enough, an unfortunate victim turned up today, stabbed to death with the snapped-off turn signal indicator of his own BMW.
As you can see, it's got beautiful markings, great temperament, lovely color, and is a little female. Give me another 9 months and I'll make you another just like it. I smiled as I handed over the certificates to the buyer.
My father always said that if the Russians ever launched a nuke, it would be too late before anyone got the warning. And as the sirens ring and a stream of vehicles crowd the city roads, I take my family the opposite way, knowing I'd at least get them a painless death.
Our two-sentence horror. My pregnant wife just gave birth to a baby boy, but he looks nothing like me, so I went to the doctor to ask about paternity testing. The doctor looked at my wife's charts, confused, then said, "Maria had a radical hysterectomy 2 years ago, so it's impossible for her to bear children. This isn't her baby either." I was shocked to see how clear the lake I was swimming in was. I don't know why all those do not swim signs were around when the water is this clear. I dreamt my wife killed my childhood abuser, and my only concern was how do we get rid of the evidence. When I woke up to 6 new heavy suitcases by the front door, I realized it wasn't a dream. Every night at 3 a.m., an unknown caller calls my phone. Finally deciding to answer, I shouted a brief, "What's your problem?" but quickly froze when I heard a distant echo of my own voice.
I begged my psychiatrist for a prescription antipsychotic, but she said my paranoia and hallucinations weren't bad enough to present any danger to myself or others yet. I thought if I could just fake my symptoms, she'd be convinced. So I snuck into her office to find what she had written about me. But all I found there was a chart comparing dosage to profit margins. After 10 years of research, I finally perfected a serum that allowed the people of this poverty-ridden country to grow back a missing limb or organ within 12 months. Now that I had a constant supply, I mentally started counting the millions I would make from selling fresh eyes and kidneys to the wealthy. Thomas accepted another day's tray of mystery meat, his suspicion growing that the lunch lady was making it out of something disgusting. When Thomas got home from school, he didn't notice the news report his mom was watching, which announced that the town now had the lowest homeless rates in the country. Our two-sentence horror. My daughter made a new friend at school called Andy. I asked her teacher about him and she replied, "Oh, we don't usually have students call teachers by the first names. You mean Mr. Simmons?" My dad keeps texting me that I'm a terrible son and he never wanted me. I go to his grave and ask him to stop, but no luck. My childhood sweetheart and I made a vow that in 20 years, if we were both still single, we'd find each other again and be together, no matter what. If she slumps in the chair now, it's only 'cause her spine sort of dislodged when I was digging her up. My wife has become so agreeable after returning from this luxury mental health retreat. My only concern is that sometimes she freezes and says some nonsense about a successful firmware update.
My uncle passed out drinks to everyone after Thanksgiving dinner, which we promptly toasted with and drank. With tears in his eyes and a full drink in his hand, he said, "I am so happy that you are all together to enjoy each other's last holiday. I'm sorry, children, but you can't go outside to play," I told my adopted kids. The streets were strewn with their missing posters, and I couldn't risk the last batch being found as I'd lost too many already. Lobsters squeal, onions weep, fresh crabs twitch. After 25 years in the business, nothing about cooking surprised me anymore. But when the carrots screamed and writhed that one night, I placed down my chef's knife, hung up the apron, and never set foot in a kitchen again. I notice a man in all my family photos, even my selfies I took by myself. At just 3 years old, she's trapped along with 48 rapists and murderers in cell block D. At 7 feet long and over 500 pounds, they should last her at least a month at current metabolic rates. I don't know how long I will grieve the death of my child. If I stop too soon, it might raise suspicion. She shouldn't have kept that baby at all, but she definitely needs to stop breastfeeding him in public. Agreeing to the taxidermy was a mistake. I elbowed my way to the front of the jeering crowd and up to the cage, eager to see the zoo's new wild beast I'd heard so much about. But as I slowly registered the grimy, trembling thing huddled behind the bars, I realized that it was not a gorilla or a chimpanzee, but a hollow-eyed young man. The minister reached into the box and pulled out a 6-foot rattlesnake as he preached to the congregation that the righteous could handle venomous serpents without fearing harm. "Fooled you again," said the snake, biting the minister on the nose. The 12-year-old screamed as 2 of his classmates were shot dead right beside him. Bawling for his mom, he missed being in school with his friends instead of being conscripted to the front lines for this long, grueling war. "Hey Google, can I take a left here and go down Interstate 10? The man asked, his sobs breaking the silence of the empty car. "Your request to visit your father has already been denied. Twice," the system replied, cold and unwavering. "Onions placed in your socks, crazy old folk medicine. But after weeks of feeling so sick with a weird cold, I figured it couldn't hurt. It occurred to me just how wrong I was, as the tiny worms started to bore out of every inch of my skin. All the nations agreed to make ironclad rule of AI never harm humans. And now for the next agenda, who can be classified as humans? We watched as the rockets soared into the skies and beyond, carrying 5,000 carefully chosen individuals, humanity's salvation. But this will only buy Earth a month until the next tribute. My uncle just gave me a rotten monkey hand for a Christmas present, and it's really creeping me out. He's so weird and annoying, I wish I never see him again." "I'm sorry. You're just not my type," she said. Recovering in the burn unit, she wished she had said yes. "I made the wrong choice when a man broke into my house at night and forced me to choose who would die between me and my daughter. Now I can't do anything because I'm a ghost. And all I can do is watch him do horrible things to her, right next to my body, stabbed, bloody and dead." After a horrible car accident, my previously comatose daughter worked hard to write the answers to the doctor's questions, squinting through her bandages. I was so proud, at least until the doctor asked her name, and she wrote the name of her best friend who had been buried a week prior. "They say you only die when you're forgotten. I lie in my coffin as I have for the last 1,000 years, waiting for the sweet release of death. I wish I had never cured cancer." The only guilt the woman had was that she was going to leave her son in a world full of monsters, like those who were filming her. "Jump," her son commented on the grainy live stream of a woman standing on the guardrail of a bridge. "Help me! I'm trapped!" cried the little girl through the freshly uncovered gaps in the rubble. "Fuck that!" yelped the archaeologist as he hurriedly placed back the ancient tombstones. The fortune teller said that drinking would be the end of me, so I focused on my health and quit alcohol forever. But just before I went under for a routine operation, I could smell the liquor on the anesthesiologist's breath as he asked me to count backwards from 10. Being a young single dad, it took me 2 years to save enough money to take my 5-year-old daughter to Disney World. Once we entered the Magic Kingdom, I let her run free and smiled as my financial problems disappeared with her. The fortune teller said that drinking would be the end of me, so I focused on my health and quit alcohol forever. But just before he put me under for a routine operation, I could smell the liquor on the anesthesiologist's breath as he asked me to count backwards from 10. The creepy guy across from me on the train hasn't stopped staring. so I pull out my phone to secretly take a photo, just in case. My guts sink in panic when my phone's torch flashes into his eyes, until I realize his pupils never contracted in the sudden bright light. Live 1 year without your greatest talent, and you get $1 billion, was a deal I could not pass on, so I accepted it. I can't breathe. The gods laughed at the curse they cast upon the young woman, that anything she proclaimed would be scorned, rejected, and not believed. Their laughter died along with their strength, as she made a proclamation which spread far and wide. The gods are all-knowing. We must love and worship them. After my tank ran out of oxygen, I swam as fast as I could, desperate to reach the surface. But as my hands crashed against the sand, I immediately understood that in the darkness of the sea, I didn't realize which direction was up. They call me a monster. My family shun me. I'm unemployed, and there is no hope left for me. One sleep-deprived shake when it wouldn't stop crying, and my life is worthless now. I read my daughter a picture book that described royalty as having blue blood. The last words she whispered before passing out in the ambulance were, "I just wanted to see if I really was a princess like you and Daddy told me." Hey, Dad. I ran into one of our regular customers today, and he was asking when you're going to open the store again. He said your deli sandwiches are so addictive that he felt like he was going through withdrawal without them. He was even shaking like an addict. Remember to do that thing I like, Sarah giggled playfully, adjusting the camera as her husband excitedly took off his pants. As Sarah began to film from the corner of the dank, dark basement, the woman bound and gagged on the table began to scream. Following a loud thud, my coworker barged into the room in a panic. "The window is cracking," he said, "and we don't have enough time to surface." I like to call myself a survivor, someone who is not a victim, but a survivor of traumatic events. After all, what better way to gain the trust of other vulnerable victims, ripe for the picking? "Aren't you going to call the cops?" the burglar asked. "Why, no one knows you're here," he said with a smirk. "Here you go, your potion of youth," says the wizard, as he hands me the unlabeled flask. "Thank you very much," I say my last words, before guzzling the whole flaskful of that potion of youth. "You always stand up to a bully," I told my son one time, after picking him up from school. As I lay on the floor bleeding to death, I regretted the foolish advice I had given my little darling after watching him throw down Mommy's phone to face his stepfather instead of calling 911. The young boy bid a tearful, final goodbye to his mother as the funeral pyre was lit. She smiled back at him reassuringly as the roar of the sacrificial flames rose over her child's screams. Jokingly, I asked my dog if she was a skinwalker. She smiled and winked at me. During my historical research, I discovered the diary of a girl who had died in a smallpox epidemic. Crinkling my nose in disgust, I swept away the flakes of some kind of dandruff from between the pages before eagerly beginning to read her account. I had developed a nasty habit of licking the knife after I was done. The other surgeons were horrified. "Babe, I think there's peanuts in this. Please." "My EpiPen," I wheeze, dropping my fork. From across the dining table, I watch my wife glance briefly in my direction before she goes back to eating, as though I hadn't spoken at all. Breaking news. After 20 years, a police sketch of the fugitive dubbed the Crisscross Killer has finally been released. My entire body grows cold as I turn to look at my husband of 15 years, sleeping peacefully beside me, his face illuminated by the TV's glow. As I held my newborn, her eyes, blue and full of life, reminded me of my wife's before the hardest choice of my life was made. I whispered goodnight to my daughter, but from the crib came a familiar voice. "How could you not choose me?" The scientists injected me with an experimental compound designed to unlock the ultimate evolutionary potential of humanity, expecting me to gain godlike powers. But as my body began to turn itself inside out, my skin thickening into shell and my limbs splitting into 10 bony legs, they realized they had not factored in carcinization. I absently munched on the carrot sticks my infant gleefully stuck into my mouth at dinner. The crunch was the exact same as my little boy began to scream, and a coppery taste filled my mouth. Though I kicked him out a week ago, my boyfriend stands outside my window with a boombox every night. The sound attracts more undead every night, but I can't bring myself to take the shot. When I gained the ability to stop time without ever aging, I did so immediately for a year, filling out every desire to my heart's content. I was confused why so many were cold to me when I began time again, until, one by one, they recounted watching all the things I did when they were frozen. To who? How many times? When I asked my dad why he didn't want to give me a brother or sister, he told me the Emperor only allowed one child per family, leaving me feeling lonely at times. However, I always looked forward to visiting my family's grave, where I could sit and bring food offerings, expressing gratitude to my mom for the life I have, while imagining what my 5 older sisters may have looked like. Knowing how easily a wish can backfire, the wise young man simply asked the genie for more self-control. After 30 straight hours of manual breathing, the wise young man hanged himself. When you were put under for brain surgery, you were so relieved that you'd finally get rid of this parasite after who knows how long. From the inside of a small jar, you awake to see your own body looking at the doctors with the eyes of a scared child. After 5 years of tireless work, my thesis is finally finished. University checker says 90% AI. I wrote every word. When my torturers chained me flat to the ground over a patch of bare dirt, I thought they were leaving me to starve to death. It wasn't until the first pointed shoot pierced my stomach that I realized I'd been chained over a patch of freshly planted bamboo. It's been 4 days, and that damn clock my grandfather gave me hasn't stopped ticking my ears off. I'm too afraid to even turn it off. Every time I start to walk closer, it ticks faster and faster. There's a kind of flower, recognizable for its red petals and teardrop-like stamen, that only grows over dead bodies. I always wondered why the rent was so low when the garden was so lush and beautiful. As they soaked my legs in salt water, I thought this isn't a very effective way to torture someone. Until they brought in the goat. When I was a kid, I wished I could have 9 lives. It wasn't until 12 years later, when I put a gun in my mouth, that I realized it came true. My wife came into the kitchen while I was eating, asking where I had buried her recent miscarriage. I pointed to the garden, silently thanking God I had covered my plate with a napkin. The cops failed and the courts failed, but DNA evidence doesn't lie, so mob justice was the only justice. How could we have known he had a twin? Now that I have decided not to make any more suicide attempts and seek professional help, my husband will be so proud of me, thought the woman. As she entered her house, the first thing she saw was her husband hanging from the ceiling fan. "Tell me everything," said the cop, and the kid started telling him all the abuses he had been going through in detail. After the kid finished, his father paid the actor who was pretending to be a cop, and after the fake cop left, he decided to teach his son a lesson. "Thank you for calling Apple support. If your Face ID won't unlock the phone, do you have the passcode?" "No, just the face." As my eyes started to shut from euphoria, I looked towards the strange little girl screaming at a phone. Mommy took too much medicine again. If she survived this, she would never put off her eye exam again. "I thought I signed up for a reality TV show called Off the Grid," she cried as they slathered her in pancake batter. "It's a healthy baby girl," the midwife announced as she cut the umbilical cord. "My commiserations. Would you like me to dispose of her so you can try again?" she asked the weeping, disappointed parents. "The only thing I have left of my grandma is a pendant she gave me to protect me from evil. My new boyfriend hates it though, and is always trying to get me to take it off. We know you killed those 6 people. I'm charging you with 6 counts of murder," the detective told the killer. His other 63 victims would never get justice. When Robert's girlfriend had started being secretive about where she'd been sneaking off to, his paranoid jealousy led him to do the unthinkable. Returning home from hiding the evidence, he is greeted by a chorus of "surprise" as he walks in on the birthday party she had been planning for weeks. If you can read this, it's already too late. If you can't, there's still time, so go home Find a weapon and use it on the first person that knocks on your door. And remember, they're not really human. Please help me, the woman wrote on one side of a piece of paper in the crowded mall while her husband was not looking at her. I'm having technical issues with my bomb, she wrote on the other side and handed it to the second suicide bomber. The beauty nurse flicked the syringe and let a few beads of filler drip from the needle. You'll only feel a slight scratch. Okay, but you promise I'll win the pageant this year, Mummy? Dad just went to get some milk, Dylan recited, while cleaning the wood chipper, happy that no one would hurt his mom again. The aliens landed and demanded to speak to our leaders, so we collected every president, monarch, and religious leader and gathered to meet them, but they were unhappy and had only one response: not them. As you succumb to your wounds on the beach, you write your killer's name in the sand. As you begin to fade, you feel a drop of rain. As he yelled, "I know exactly who you are," a single tear formed on his girlfriend's face, then another and another, until she was nothing but shreds on the ground, and the thing wearing her skin revealed itself. My mother always said animals were too fragile to harm, so I should be vegan. But why do I hear the trees speak perfect English as they beg for their lives? After waking up, the man found a note that read, "Your employment with our company is officially terminated." The small two-seater spaceship that he and his superior used to come to the uninhabited planet was also gone. I was watching a movie with my boyfriend, and suddenly I felt his hand getting colder. I sighed as I got off the couch to put it in the microwave again. I kept stroking my daughter's hair with one hand as she cried over yet another rejection letter. With the other hand, I picked up the hacksaw and coolly noted, "I told you, sweetie, the only way we're going to get the money is if we apply to one of those scholarships for the physically disabled." "Every day in high school, you threatened to break every bone in my body," Billy cried to at his bully. "So you're lucky I'm just only going to break one of yours," he continued, aiming the hammer at his restrained tormentor's C4 vertebrae. "We don't need a verbal confirmation to come inside. An open door with a welcome mat is enough." "How do you tell the difference between live ammunition and blanks?" asked the new hire. "I don't know. I just get paid to load the guns," replied the prop assistant. "We received word that you are involved in the kidnapping of a child," the investigator confronted the televangelist while they searched over his 9 children. The televangelist's frail wife stood up shakily and said, "What took you so long? It's been 20 years. My kidnapper handed me another glass of sake, promising that he'll release me when I finish the bottle. With my face feeling flush and my heart trying not to seize with each glass, we both know that I'm never leaving this room alive. A burn victim would look better than you. I repeat the phrase in my head, looking at my crush's burning body after she rejected me, and I realize how much of a liar she always was. She said I could smash if I beat her in a game. One game of Russian roulette later, I'm having the time of my life. I'm worried we've already gone through 4 babysitters this month, the wife fretted. Yes, dear, but our darling son is a growing boy, so naturally we'll be extra ravenous, the husband reassured her. If you want the abuse to stop, then you have to let me know who is giving you these bruises, said the teacher to the kid. The next morning, the teacher woke up with several bruises on her and an inhuman figure standing at the foot of her bed. I was shocked as the guy across from me in the cafe got down on one knee, pulled out the ring, and called his girlfriend's name to make her turn around. 2 days later, my ears are still ringing, and I will never forget the pink mist hitting the walls. And for my last wish, I wish you were set free. I should have known that there is a reason why they were sealed in that lamp for the first place. Every time someone who isn't related to me lies to me, I get $10. I was surprised when I reached into my pocket and pulled out $30 after my mother told me, "You're safe with me, son. I haven't killed anybody." When the cops found my wife holding our deceased baby under the water in the bath, she told them that she was just trying to shut him up. She had no idea that I had been giving her the wrong medication and playing the crying on a hidden speaker, knowing it would eventually make her crack. "Taking you with me will slow us both, and taking different routes increases our odds of survival," said the man to his son. "But it says here not to take the elevator in case of fire," shouted the kid in the wheelchair, but the man was already climbing down the stairs. John's old toaster was constantly burning his toast, so he eventually caved and got a new one. When he smelled burning toast the next morning while making breakfast, he didn't think much of it until it was too late.
As I died, I knew they would never catch my murderer. Everyone knows the cops don't give a damn about justice for the homeless. I went to tuck my daughter into bed, but when I kissed her goodnight, I tasted blood. I flipped on the light to find her staring at me, mouth sewn shut. "Should I kill myself?" the sad kid wrote in his drawing book. As soon as he finished drawing 2 arrows under the sentence, the number beside the up arrow began to rise on its own.
He ate his cafeteria sandwich, trying to ignore the gut-wrenching screams, and asked, "Is this normal here?" I nodded, accustomed to the daily pain-induced shrieks, and replied, "Most people can't afford anesthesia anymore." My family said I wasn't allowed to come to Christmas dinner, even though I was clean for months, so I stole all their shit, got high, and set fire to their houses. It was only after the funerals that I heard they were planning to bring the food over to my house as a surprise to show how proud they were of me. When I was young, my abusive father would threaten to take my dog out back if I misbehaved. Years later, pointing the handgun at my father's fear-filled face, I tell him, "Let's go out back." Did you know we saved $40,000 last year by removing just 1 olive from each passenger's salad? So, imagine how much we could save if we used 1 less bolt on each of the wing flaps. The young boy thought to himself that this was the best birthday he'd had yet, and while blowing out the 6 candles on his cake, he wished that every day could be his birthday. He awoke the next day to find that it was indeed his birthday again, but there were 7 candles on his cake this time. I told my daughter that in certain countries, they cut off fingers for stealing. I kept that tradition alive after she got caught shoplifting. "I said I'd give you legs," the witch told the mermaid, with a shrug, uncaring and unrepentant. "I never said I'd turn you into a human. I warned everyone that with the whole moon I would transform into a vicious predator, praying they would lay low. In the morning, I howled at the sight of 3 packmates strung up on snares I'd set with my own pink furless forepaws the night before. They say the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. But I'd say convincing the world of an alternate afterlife was truly my masterpiece. I get a random tip in my mirror every day, such as, "Take the train to work," or "Don't eat pizza." I froze as the mirror spelt the word "run." My blood runs cold as the cop locks the cuffs around my wrists. How could I forget to check my copyright license before carelessly humming to myself in public? When my wife texted me, "I got a new man now, so I don't need you anymore," after I walked out during an argument, I burned our house down with her in it. It was only when I checked my phone afterwards that I saw the image underneath of her holding a new puppy with the caption, "I'm sorry. Hope this makes it up to you."
It turns out when you die, you spend a day in hell and a day in heaven, and you get to choose where you stay. After my oddly quick yet very pleasant day in heaven, my mind was already made up, yet I was still forced to spend a day in hell, which apparently is equivalent to a millennium on Earth.
I killed my wife this morning with just 1 word. Not trusting her nose while recovering from a cold, she asked me if I could smell gas as I was leaving for work, and I simply said, "No." I'm very proud that my unmarried daughter is in her 20s and still a virgin, and I know she is, because every time she comes home from a date, I inspect under her dress to make sure the stitches I put there are still in place. The woman, buried alive by mistake, cried tears of joy when she heard scratching outside of her casket. Her tears froze in her eyes when she realized too late that the scratching was coming from beneath her casket. "I will give you the gift of immortality and a 200-year head start before I hunt you down," said the Endless Hunter. After seeing his trophy room, I decided immortality wasn't worth it. My best friend keeps trying to convince me to stop talking to the man I connected with through a prison penpal website, but she'd never understand. As I heard him sneak into my house, I never felt so safe as I did in that moment, knowing he'd make sure my father never put his hands on me again. The woman next to me in bed is an imposter, not my wife. I'm stuck because to prove that to anyone I'd have to tell them where I buried her body. "Each press of the button takes away 1 year of life, but gives you $1 million, the man explained. 200 years, an uncountable amount of money, and countless button presses later, I wonder if this next press will finally be the last. I've spent 75 years killing your kind, and nothing you do to me with that knife is going to make me regret it, I said defiantly as the vampire approached me. We'll see how you feel about that after 100 years under my knife, said the vampire as it opened its wrist and forced its cursed blood down my throat. I ran, faster and faster, back and forth between the 2 rooms of the hospital, my wife bleeding out in one room and my newborn son struggling to breathe in the other. I am still not sure who stopped me from running in the end, the tear-streaked pediatrician or the defeated surgeon. Mommy, it stung me when I tried to poke your leg. I thought told my son so many times, blue to the sky, orange to the thigh, if Mommy can't breathe. I managed to kill the Demon King, even though the ancient text says he is immortal. As the memories of atrocities flash through my mind, and I feel 2 horns protrude from my head, I realized what they meant. Finding myself surrounded by zombies and vampires, both crawling towards me attracted by the scent of my blood, I thanked our gun laws for the first time as I started shooting them one by one. Totally ruined the Halloween party, though. This Halloween skeleton is perfect, my mother complimented the decorations, not noticing me shaking silently in rage. Dead or not, my sister would always be perfect. I truly love Halloween so much. It's the only time of the year I can use my victims' recorded screams and skeletons, and they think it's ambiance. You couldn't kill 100 people with a single bullet, they laughed. So I pointed my gun towards the submarine's air tank and pulled the trigger to prove it. I have slain all the soldiers in your skeleton army. It's time for you to give up now. But you forgot one, said the evil wizard, as I began to feel a strange itch deep in my bones. Happy 10-year anniversary, my wife declared, as she began spoon-feeding me a piece of cake. I struggled weakly against my shackles as she fed me. I wish I never asked for a divorce. I was hired to set up and monitor security cameras at my daughter's school, but I found a frightening pattern when the tapes are at 100x speed. The hill the school sits on is breathing. As soon as time travel is invented, I travel back to the day my 8-year-old daughter was kidnapped, determined to find out who took her. As I'm driving up to her last known location, near the quiet park, a young girl runs right in front of the car, but I'm unable to react quick enough. Turkey's gone, my husband yelled, and through the airplane window, we watched the Mediterranean pour into the resulting void. My family can trace our ancestors back to the very first Thanksgiving. Every year I quietly reflect, I wish I could have told them to kill those pale men who came from the sea and everyone that followed. We asked Aunt Judy why she didn't bring her famous cranberry sauce to Thanksgiving dinner this year. I hit menopause, she said. We have some questions. The autopsy shows that she drank bleach. I thought about the bottles my mother-in-law had prepared as an olive branch and wept. In a stroke of short-sighted genius, we lured the monster around the city walls to its own tail, where gluttony triumphed over the pain of the bites. Now every time the serpentine abomination, coiled around our town, moves to devour more of itself, the loop tightens. Liquor was my only friend for many years, but my recent stomach cancer diagnosis means I can never drink again. But the doctors never said anything about putting vodka in my enema bag. I laughed at the poor English of the fortune teller had when she told me, "Your dismemberment will be by murder." As my key jammed in the locked car door, I saw the oddly shaped black cloud approaching and recalled the crow that I had kicked this morning. I know I have an unfortunate reputation in this day and age, but I assure you I was a man of honor and a stalwart defender of Christendom, said the vampire. Well, I suppose it would be unchristian of me to let a fellow man of God starve, said the plantation owner. The rich family I served in their doomsday bunker never suspected I would poison their food, just like I never suspected the air supply would have a dead man's switch.
Oh, I would never hurt you, the kidnapper reassured the child even as the sirens grew louder. Physically, he clarified, pulling the trigger on himself. It has been almost a decade since the last human birth, and our children are done pretending. I always thought it odd when my deaf daughter would cover her ears every time we entered our basement. She started doing the same thing whenever we drove by the cemetery.
Every time I got back from the shop, my dad would beat me and accuse me of shoplifting, as I always returned with more than I'd been sent to get. Such a pity, the kind shop owner would say, thinking my bruises a sign of malnutrition, so she'd send me off with extras each time and watch me all the way home. The gravedigger was told to bury him 8 feet deep, but decided not to, because the hospital was no longer looking for bodies. It wasn't because of the grave robbers, the priest said, crossing himself as he peered at the claw marks across the cemetery grass. The devil agreed to release my husband from his deal in exchange for the soul of our 13th child. We do not yet have any children. Well, at least he's not gay, I sigh with relief, peering into my boyfriend's closet. The headless, naked woman offers no response. But Mr. Mayor, the killer didn't leave much evidence. We need more time, said the chief. You don't need to find the killer, chief. You just need to find someone.